Okay, going now.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It is May the 13th, Wednesday. We're continuing discussion on budget. This is committee of the whole. So just to make sure we have all of our councillors, we'll do our usual check-in, beginning with Councillor Stretch again.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and colleagues. Here, District 1, Waverly, Fall River, Musquodoboit Valley, ready to roll. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Councillor Hensley.
President accounted for, and happy birthday, sir.
Thank you very much. Councillor Karsten.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. Also here and accounted for, and I echo what the good colleague next to me said. A very happy birthday to Mayor Mike.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
I'm here. Happy birthday, Mike. Good things come on May 13th. You share a birthday with my son.
All right.
That's awesome. Yeah. Nothing like snow and COVID and budget to celebrate a birthday, I must say.
My story's a bit longer.
Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm here and accounted for. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Mancini.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Mr. Mayor, all the best to you and a big day for you. I actually thought you were older.
Yeah, I thought I was too. Councillor Mason.
Happy birthday, Mr. Mayor. Hello from District 7, everybody.
Councillor Smith.
Hello, everybody. Mr. Mayor, happy birthday. You're catching up to me. You'll be there one day.
Yeah, that's the difference with leap years. Councillor Cleary. Councillor Cleary. Come back. Councillor Walker.
Here, Mr. Mayor, and just remember you're only old as you think you are.
I was hoping for better than that, actually, Russell, but that's okay. Councillor Adams.
Only as old as you think you are. I've never heard that one before. So how old do you think you are, Your Worship?
Well, I'm going to go on mute to answer that.
Order of the
I
day.
want to thank Councillor Adams for bringing me my lunch. That was kind.
I'm good like that.
I'll pay you back at Christmas or when COVID ends, whichever comes first. Councillor Zarowski.
Happy birthday, Mr. Mayor. And how old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?
Okay, let's just take a 10-minute break. I want to give something some thought and come back with an answer. So. Councillor Whitman.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. I'd like to echo my colleagues' remarks and say happy birthday.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And, you know, today is definitely a very important day of reflection, of pondering and dwelling. And this is a day where we take stock of what we value and celebrate past successes. And to that, I am not talking about the budget, folks. No, sirree. Today, we take a moment to honor Mike Savage on the occasion of his 60th birthday. As the mayor has already pointed out, celebrating a milestone birthday in May when it's still snowing on a budget meeting day and during a pandemic obviously means that you were real nasty in a past life. But on this day, please take some time to have a blast, dance like you are 30, eat like you are 21, and forget where you parked, just like the 60-year-old that you are. I don't have a birthday cake, unfortunately. Don't even have a cupcake. Just have this lousy little brownie, but you just blow out the candle and we'll celebrate your birthday.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Consider it done. That's, geez, I'm hoping to do better than dancing like I did when I was 30. But anyway, that's good. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much, and I'd also like to echo everybody's comments and wish you a very happy birthday today. We're here gathering because of this this virus that took our budget that was just about ready back in March and sent it into a tailspin. And so we're discussing it today, and I had a look at the calendar, and it was 2 months ago today, May 13th, that we as councillors and as City Hall staff got a notification that there might be someone at City Hall who was in contact with someone who tested positive, and that put us all on high alert, and just made this virus that had been approaching around the world, it made it real for us. And we've been dealing with this for exactly 2 months today. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Mayor, and happy birthday again.
Thank you. Councillor Outfit.
I am here. Happy birthday, Mayor, and Lisa wearing the dunce cap in your honor. I'm not quite sure about that, but Eddie, there you go. There you go. But listen, many happy returns, and let's hope next year is a little less uproarious for your birthday.
Right. Thank you. So thank you all. I'm going to put a motion on the floor to start us off. Be it resolved, there be no more discussion of birthdays through the rest of this meeting. But thank you for your kind thoughts, and we'll get down to work. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. It's occurring to me now that I got a note that you wanted to speak. Was that what you wanted to say? Okay.
That was, yes, that was it. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's very, very kind. It's been quite a day. I've been eating cake on Twitter, and my Twitter was apparently hijacked by my staff as well. I don't know how that happens or if it's even legal, but it's nonetheless. Okay, folks, there's obviously no minutes. Where we left off yesterday.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are.
Well, there is minutes from.
Well, so we don't approve. We don't approve.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
No, but there's no approval, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
that's something we want to know.
yeah. So yesterday in our discussions, we were looking at the budget presentation that our CIO and CFO had brought forward to us. And where we left off, we took it away, the agenda review crew, to have a look at where we were and what we could do going forward. It's clearly going to take a bit of time. As I've said before, that staff have done their tremendous work, and it's now up to us to do our work, which means giving this recast budget. As you all know, a lot of work has gone into it before, starting before Christmas, and it was headed in one direction, and we had to recast it due to COVID. So we decided to make some changes and bring in department heads, if that's the wish of council, to speak about how they looked at their budget. And we were on a high level sort of issues of clarification. And I think that's where we will continue for now. And if it's council's wish, we will bring in some of the heads of the directors of departments. But I understand that Councillor Mason wants to lead us off today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've spoken with a number of our colleagues, and I've spoken to, and I shared this with staff just recently, and it seems to me that there is a kind of general consensus among most councillors, a majority of councillors, to explore an alternative to what's been proposed in terms of staffing, volunteer firefighter recognition, grants and programs. That's not to say that we want to undo the layoffs that have already been done, or that there aren't service reductions like the customer contact center in Scotia Square, for example, that don't make sense, but that we do want to explore what that looks like. So I put together what is kind of an omnibus motion that would ask for a supplementary staff report for all those things that would identify how we could, what we would fund and how we would fund it. And is now the time, Mr. Mayor, to put that on the floor? Is that would that be appropriate?
We actually have an amendment on the floor, Mayor, from Councillor Adams, which has not been withdrawn.
Right, we agreed to deal with that as part of the parking lot. Councillor Adams, are you okay with withdrawing that?
Yes, excuse me, thank you. Yes, thank you, Worship. I'll withdraw it because Councillor Mason and I have spoken, and what he's proposing will address those needs. And I would also like to second that motion when it comes forward.
Okay, so Councillor Adams is asking to withdraw the motion. Is there any opposition to him doing that? Councillor Mason, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that the Budget Committee request a supplementary staff report outlining an operational budget alternative that retains funding for proposed hiring and restores vacancy management to normal levels, volunteer firefighter recognition, grants and programs, up to no more than $33 million, with funding to come through a combination of reduction of debt charge by up to $15 million, conversion of capital from operating to debt of up to $20.5 million, the 2019-20 end of year surplus, and reduction of the increase in reserves scheduled for this year by up to $12 million. I so move.
Councillor Cleary, second.
Councillor Cleary, Councillor Adams had indicated he would be seconding that, had put his name in on that, but certainly have you as well.
Just to clarify, Councillor Mason, you said 12 million up to, it says 21
Yeah,
in your...
I think the email I sent around, Councillor, so I can speak to that right off if I may. I'll speak to the motion, but I think I just flipped the numbers around in the motion that I've been sending around. So Councillor Austin noted that and we can start there and I'll work my way backwards through those, that the reserves this year in the sheet that was sent around by finance showed that the reserves would increase this year by at least $12 million. And given the financial situation that we're in and the cuts that we're looking at, I have to say that I question whether or not now's the time to be putting even more money into the rainy day fund when it feels like we're already in a rainy day. I don't know that I would budget to increase those reserves even while we need to try and protect and preserve them for the future. So that's one potential funding source. We were told yesterday that the end of year surplus could be as much as $36 million. That's another potential funding source. I have mentioned that I feel that now is the time to take on more operating debt or more debt for capital and reduce capital from operating, and that's another $20.5 million. We can finance that over a much longer period of time than the line of credit. That being said, if we have an economic turnaround or federal money comes to help fund programs, that would be one of the first things I would want to retire, would be that additional debt. I wouldn't want to leave that out there unless we absolutely had to. And then, of course, the $15 million, the reduction in the debt charge that's on the books proposed for $30.5 million, which I still have a lot of concerns about. I understand what Ms. Fraser is saying and the CAO is saying when they talk about the importance of setting money aside to pay for paying back the line of credit that we'll be taking with the province. But again, I have to emphasize that $188 million amount is for the line of credit is a cash flow amount based on when we're going to get paid back by getting paid back by the people who are in arrears on their taxes or delayed on their taxes. The $10 million was noted as that's our worst case scenario for the unpaid taxes and money not recovered through tax sales. So that's our exposure to risk, is my understanding, is the $10 million. The rest of the payment should be coming back through principal payments aren't an expense. Principal payments come from cash flow. So I need to understand that. And I feel like, okay, let's be prudent, set aside $16 or $17 million of toward debt repayment. That is essentially putting more money into a reserve toward paying back that principal payment. That's fine. If we want to be belt and suspenders and maybe a rope and maybe some duct tape to be extra absolutely sure that we have the money to pay for that line of credit, that's fine. But I question that it needs to be at $33 million given the other operational impacts. At its core for me, I don't want to, and I'll just stop after this, I don't want to see us reducing our staff capacity when what I'm getting from our staff and from the public is the need for our services has never been higher. The need for us to be staffed to be able to deliver active transportation projects, for us to be able to deliver transformations in streets, for us to be able to stay on top of development applications and building permits and all the things that are going on. The fact that our rec staff are being the Parks and Rec staff are being run ragged right now, constantly responding to the changes that are happening because of COVID in terms of how the public engages with our facilities and with our parks. And so the idea of having a hiring freeze right now, I don't think that helps us at all. We need to make sure those positions are filled so that we actually have that capacity, both for now during this phase of living with COVID and in the recovery phase. We don't want to be staffing up in 2 years admitting we don't have the capacity to do this. So on top of that, we have everything from volunteer firefighter recognition to community grants to arts grants to grant search and rescue to the rural transportation. All those pieces, all those trusted community partners, who some of whom we've partnered with for decades, are counting on us not to leave them with additional financial burden during this difficult time for them as well. So I would like to see us get a staff report that outlines how we could fund those things. I look forward to hearing from my colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Wei. So let's just, a couple of things. First of all, does everybody have a copy of that? how can we make sure that everybody has a copy of that actual motion?
Where I can provide.
So Cheryl will provide that to all the councillors. Secondly, before we get into debate on this, maybe I'd like to hear from Jacques and or Jane, just to sort of frame the discussion, and then we can get into the list of speakers. Jacques or Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of framing the discussion on the go forward or this particular motion?
Yeah, just staff's thought on the motion before we have a discussion on it, if there's anything pertinent that we need to know or.
Well, I think it's something that we can take back and go back with the staff report. You know, I would have to reinforce this message that, you know, we have a cash flow problem. There's no question about that. If we're going to be reducing debt, we're going to be reducing the payment on the short-term debt by $15 million or thereabouts. That's going to drag right into your 21-22 operating budget, at which time you may well be in a position that you have to take on more debt, more short-term debt, therefore more payments. I would also add that, you know, after October, we're going to be in a situation where we may have to borrow more money then, and that money would have to be paid back, and all of that will start to roll up into 21-22 budget, and that's the impact there. So, you know, our advice is certainly not to reduce the payment on the short-term debt this year, because you'll be setting yourself up for failure in subsequent years. But we can certainly take that back and consider that and give you our best professional judgment and advice as usual on that issue. You know, there's no question that, you know, the changes or the budget adjustments that we've asked and you're suggesting you make are significant budget adjustments. You know, we are trying to set up a situation where this year we can get through without a tax increase by maintaining a basic level of services. Next year is a whole different situation. You know, this pandemic we're learning things every day and every month. It's very difficult to predict what could happen or may happen, but certainly based on our modeling, based on what we've learned from other jurisdictions, that this is the best advice we can provide you at this time. But you know, certainly it's council's budget, and we will take all of that back and come back with a comprehensive staff report and all the things that may get put into the parking lot, and give you our best advice at that time. Perhaps Jane would like to weigh in now, Mr. Mayor.
Sure, Jane.
Thank you, Jacques, Mr. Mayor, through you. So, you know, certainly as the CAO is saying, definitely we would go back and look at the options that are there. When, you know, a budget really is about risk. It's about how much risk do you want to take, and what your year-end financial position is going to be. You know, so some of the advice that will come back on the reserves is, you know, we do use some of the funding in the reserves to pay for in-year expenses. So, for example, we have a reserve for the Halifax Convention Centre. So by putting money into that reserve, it means that we don't have to come through the operating budget. So we can certainly do a lot more digging into that. The only small clarification I would make to Councillor Mason's opening remarks was on the debt. When we take out debenture debt for capital, there are no options for early retirement. It is locked in for a term, so whatever the determination is for the repayment schedule, that's what we're locked into. But you know, definitely staff will take the recommendations, go through all of the options, and come back with a report as per budget process. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Okay, thank you for that, for framing that for us. I have Sam, Councillor Austin, sorry, Councillor Austin.
Sam, I am, Mr. Mayor. That's always fine. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mason, for bringing this forward, and thank you, staff, for being on hand for this. You know, I'm going to support Councillor Mason's motion, and I'm going to say this, and it's not to find fault with anyone whatsoever, because I mean, we've been in such an unprecedented situation, having to turn things around very quickly. It's really, I know it's been very challenging for everyone, but I feel like part of the value of this motion is there was a bit of a conversation that I think would have been helpful prior to baking this budget more fully, to have come to council and really said, well, here's our pressures. This is what we're looking at. What's your risk comfort level on where do you want to go? Do you want to reduce more on capital? Do you want to reduce more on operating? What's your take on taxes, et cetera, and I had that kind of high level discussion and then gone off and built the budget from that, because, you know, I feel like we are kind of coming into this a couple steps down the line, almost like fiscal direction, the way we do that in December, and then we get into the details in the new year under normal circumstances. I know these aren't normal circumstances and there's reasons why that didn't happen, but I think that would have been of value. And in part, what I like about Councillor Mason's motion is it gives us some options to rethink, well, maybe there is another path to this, because certainly I mean, it's hard to be comfortable with the cuts that are proposed. I share Councillor Mason's trepidation about much of it, you know, whether it's police, fire, Parks and Rec, some of the work that's going on in TPW. There's a lot of stuff that I'd hate to see. And I know we have the directors on hand, but I mean, vacancy management is impacts. There's going to be impacts from that I don't think we fully understand or know at this stage. So, I mean, there is risk there. So I like this. The other benefit that I see coming from this is I imagine it would be at least a few weeks before we would, before staff would have the ability to report back. What would the timeline be? Do you have any ideas, Jacques or Jane?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. So we have meetings scheduled today and next week, and we expect at least one more meeting next week. Our intent is still to come back to council on the last meeting of May with a recommendation. Should it take more time than that, you know, we'll let you know, but that's the current thinking. We've done a lot of work in advance. I do need to respectfully comment on your comment associated with, you know, should we have followed a different process? We follow the process that we normally follow in these things. That's our usual budget process. You know, we wouldn't be here today, frankly, if we would have followed a different process in terms of having a broader discussion about direction. We're crunched for time, and we're trying to bring this forward in a timely way so that we can actually have a budget on or about June 1st. But I do appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Okay, well, we'll just have to disagree on that. I mean, coming to council at the end, when you guys have been working on this, I mean, you have all the info, you've done your trade-offs. We haven't, and it's very hard at this late juncture to get the head wrapped around, well, how bad is it? Is it really, right? So, I mean, I think that's where this inclination to look at options is coming from.
Sure, look, I appreciate that, and but that's the process we're in, and we're here to get your input. You know, we're giving you our best professional advice. This is the advice coming from the entire senior leadership team to you, and now council has, as the mayor says, needs to do its work, and this is the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, well, we'll focus on the motion if it passes and what the other options are. I mean, I guess I would voice that for
Councillor Austin, we're at 6 minutes.
Time. Yeah. Okay, I'll circle back. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Back. I do want to echo something that Councillor Austin had suggested, because I meant to frame this up today, and that is that we don't have a handbook for how to recast a budget due to a pandemic. We don't have a handbook as to how to recast a budget that is delayed in getting passed. And so everybody's been doing their job on this. And I know from being on calls with the senior directors how seriously they've taken this, and I know how much work Jacques and Jane have put into it. They have done their job, and they've done it well. And it's now our job, and I encourage councillors to ask all the questions that they want, request more information as necessary. I certainly don't see it as questioning any of the work that the staff have done. I don't think Councillor Austin is questioning that either. We just want to make sure that we have the information that we need to make those decisions. So I say that as much for the people who are watching maybe a little bit confused because it goes to this whole issue of how municipal government works, which is we're doing this out in the open and we're asking questions for the answers that we have. And it's really democracy and decision making in its purest form. So I think it's important that we all get comfort on that. All right, I have Councillor Whitman is next.
Thank you, Mayor Savage. Thank you, Councillor Austin, for your comments, but mostly thank you, Mr. CAO, for your comments. I agree with many of your recent decisions regarding laying off, vacancy management, the hiring freeze. Those were all good decisions, and I know that none of those decisions were made lightly. And to undo all those right now seems like a step backwards for a lot of tough decisions that needed to be made, not just for this fiscal year, but for the tough fiscal year we're going to have next year as well. So I appreciate the tough work recently on this and on the budget, and to the CFO as well. In Councillor Mason's preamble about the priorities of things that we need to get done, the active transportation and the changes to streets and roads, it's no secret that I don't think that that's a priority right now during this pandemic. Many of the cuts, almost all the cuts, I would say, were necessary. The hiring freeze is necessary. The vacancy management work is necessary. So to slow down for a staff report when we're hoping to have this done by June the 1st, I'm afraid it might set us back. So I guess my question is procedurally, and I think Councillor Austin asked it about how long it would take to get the staff report back. I'm wondering, what does that do to our meeting today if we pass this motion right here up front in the beginning of this meeting? What do we work on the rest of the meeting? Do we take a recess? Or so I guess that would be my first question to staff. Obviously this is a cash flow problem. It's not a quick fix, and that's a concern. I heed the CAO's warning, and so I'll listen to you for advice on next steps and what happens if this does pass today.
So I'll take the first part of that, which is what happens if it passes. I think we would take a little bit of a break, but there's a couple of options. One is we could continue to bring in the department heads for discussions, even in abeyance of this report coming back. That's an option. The other option is to look at the capital items, which we are going to have to consider as part of the process as well. And it may be that we would go directly to the capital. Jacques, did you have anything else on those?
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's quite important for council to hear and ask your questions from each of the business unit directors. So the fact that this motion would pass is further direction in terms of coming back to you with a report. But I think it's important that council hears from each business unit director as to where they are. And some of the motion itself, you may be able to use that motion to inspire further questions of the directors that you may already have come up with. So I would say that I think we should proceed. We should proceed with the conversation on capital, and I don't think this will delay anything. I think our intention, Jane and I have discussed this. We believe that we can come back to you with a staff report certainly sometime next week. Probably wouldn't be the 19th, but maybe whatever the next additional date is established by council, and go from there. My concern, frankly, is that if we don't have conversations with all the business unit directors, and we simply come back with a staff report on this particular motion, that there'll be lots more questions from the business unit directors, and we'll be maybe end of June or July before we ever get to a budget. We cannot wait until July for a budget. We need to have a budget at the latest early June, right? We were targeting latter part of May. As I mentioned yesterday, we can push that out another week, but that is about the size of it, right? That's what extent that we can wait, because we're then at legal risk in terms of making payments to contractors and things like that. So I don't see those items to be necessarily mutually exclusive. I think that we need to have an inclusive debate, get all the information on the table so that council is fully informed going forward. Thank you.
John Traves, any thoughts on that too?
Mayor, just to build on that, the committee's process, as you know, you have the main motion on the budget, which has already been moved and is on the floor. And so the motion for a supplemental report, generally the committee treats that, in this case, as the start of the list for additional items, the parking lot, so-called, and any other items that would arise in terms of additional information that council wants, having discussed the various budgets from the business units, would be added to that, and they would all come back for your consideration in terms of which option do you want to proceed with, if any, based on the supplemental reports that come out of it. I'm not sure that we have the directors all online to deal with the capital component, in and of itself today. I think the plan, as you had indicated, coming out of agenda review, was to hear from TPW today and have council have an opportunity to ask questions, and there may be some additional parking lot items that come out of that, followed by the other business units, but it's up to council.
Thank you. And Mayor Savage, just so I don't have to come back. So I'm in favor of what's been done so far, and I think it was necessary. So I'm not in favor of undoing what we've accomplished. So I don't think I'll be supporting the current motion, but I'll be listening to my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. I just think for clarification, I don't think that this motion directs any decisions. It directs some actions to come back, but it doesn't necessarily change anybody's point of view.
Right.
I do think that we have department heads lined up, Jacques, to appear. So my sense is, if we go through the debate and this does pass, that we would still be able to hear from the department heads. I don't think it's contradictory to the motion. At some point in time, people are going to want to hear from the department heads. So that would be my preference, Jacques.
Yeah, it's exactly what my position is too, Mayor. I think we need to hear from the directors. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we need to go through the motion on this one, get a council direction, and then move on to Transportation Public Works and the others as we go forward, and that will allow us to get a full appreciation of what the direction from council is on all items. That may be in the parking lot, and we'll come back with a comprehensive report at some point, hopefully by the end of next week.
Okay, and Jane and John, I assume you're okay with that. Unless I hear otherwise. That's my view at this point. So we'll see with the conversation. John, I see you've unmuted yourself.
That is the process, Mayor. I think you've got it.
Okay. Well, council will determine, but that's certainly my view. Councillor Russell, please.
Thank you very much. We had discussions yesterday, high-level discussions, and you were looking for input on that, and I took that as something to frame the rest of the budget discussions in. I'd like to return to that for a couple of minutes and just say that the three things that I see as paramount as driving what I'm going to look at everything else on are health and safety, food security, and shelter, with the economy coming after that. And anything that supports health and safety, food security, and shelter, I'm going to be generally in favor of. Anything else I'm going to look at in a much more critical eye. As to the economy, fairly simply, we have to look at what we have as far as an income and what we have as far as expenses. And when we look at our income, that's a huge question mark. And we will know some of that at the beginning of next month. And I can certainly see that this will get harder and much more unknown. It's looking into a shaded crystal ball. We don't know what it's going to look like. And so I want to be extremely careful with the amount of expenses that we have and make sure that we have the finances in order to be able to support those expenses. So with that, I'm not willing to entertain any additional debt, and I'm not willing to entertain any lessening of the reserves that we have, because we may need them later on. And I'm not willing to entertain right now any raising of taxes. And so if we can get out of this with a municipality that we can fund and make sure that we are still able to do the work that we need to do, there are going to be some hard choices that we have to make. But so long as there is no additional debt, no lessening of reserves, and no additional taxes, I'm willing to consider it much more positively. In this case, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to support Councillor Mason's motion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stretch.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you to staff and indeed to Councillor Mason for bringing this forward. Wow, what a difference a day makes. You know, I've always considered myself to be an optimist and look at the glass being half full, and I still feel that way today. I want to reflect on Jacques' comments and how staff may be or may not be interpreting the motion that's on the floor, which I am going to support today. We're all on the same side, and Jacques, you, Jane, and Jay, and all your staff have brought your best recommendation forward, and I take that very seriously. The concerns that I raised yesterday as it related to public safety, as it related to the further burdening of our volunteers and indeed ground search and rescue, I think are partially addressed in the motion that's on the floor right now. At the same time, I don't disagree with what Councillor Russell just said. I am not as concerned as it relates to some of your other budget considerations relating to vacancy management, as relating to other cutbacks. So do you have your work cut out for you? Absolutely. And that's why we hired you. I have faith in you. I have faith in your staff. At the same time, I call on my business background, and as business owners, on many occasions, we have to make decisions that are not quite lined up with what the many accountants that we seek guidance from recommend to us. I do agree with Councillor Mason when he says, as it relates to our rainy day fund, our reserves, if there was ever a rainy day, this is it. So if this is not the time we've been saving for, I don't know what it would be. And I've always wondered that question. I think we're living it right now. And I believe we have to look at all options. So I feel relatively comfortable. All we're doing is asking for a further report, not to burden you any more than you already have been, but all options need to be on the table, all the while protecting our core mandate. And as it relates to public safety, that is one component that I will not deviate from. As it relates to where we go from today, absolutely, I think we should hear from your directors. They've been working as hard as anybody, and really, where else do I have to go? So I'm in it for the long haul, and I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for all the work. Like I say, we're talking all about rainy days, but at the end of the day, I think we're all trying to get an understanding of the urgency and still responding urgently. But I think we're still trying to get that understanding of where we are and what, you know, it's not that we're questioning anything, we just want more information. So from John's process, I'm understanding that the motion that's before us now is basically starting a list of options. So it's information for a supplementary report, and that's one option that we will consider. There's, you know, the opportunity for other people to put options on the floor at this time. But I know when I spoke yesterday about what we're going to do at this meeting, I had asked for more information on the application for the $188 million. And I think Jane was prepared to provide that today. So that's my understanding. So I'll ask Jane to look into that. But since we're all gathered here today, I just thought we also have the opportunity to go in camera to have a better understanding of vacancy management and what that means. So, you know, I'm willing to entertain going in camera to get that more information today. So I just wanted to ask Jane if she has that information on the application for noise level.
Jane, are you okay there?
No, we can't hear a thing, Jane.
There's a lot of static. No, her
mute,
lips
Jane?
are moving.
You're not on mute, are you?
I think the cable's loose.
Yeah, the headset keeps cutting in and out is what the problem is. Can you hear me now?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I'll speak up a bit without yelling. I sent the information on how the $188 million was calculated. It was in the package with the CAMAC study and the reserve stuff. in there to show how we calculated that information. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions that you have around that, Councillor.
My questions would be a condensed version of what you sent us by email.
Okay.
I did say the word is understanding.
Okay, so what we did, and this is by the business owners. So if you look at the sheet before you, it's broken out by the different types of categories. So it's nonprofit organizations, small business, hospitality, all of those different classifications that we see that build in the assessment roll. We then calculated the amount of tax that they would be billed and would pay for the fiscal year. So both the original April and October bill, and came up with the estimated tax. We then looked, so where it says program uptake, that's how many people we thought would be deferring their taxes. And you have to remember that this was created for the joint NSFM AMA deferral program. So that's why the language deferral is still there. So we estimated that on nonprofit organizations, 100% would not be able to pay their taxes. So that's what would happen there. On small businesses, so they're defined as under 2 million in assessment. So it's hairdressers, nail salons, service industry, doctors, dentists, those sorts of things. We thought about 90% would be hit by that. So these are the businesses that, because of the state of emergency, have been required to virtually close. So we felt about 90% would not be able to pay their taxes. Hospitality, restaurants, bars, hotels, and motels, we figured 100%. So we wrote those down 100%. Fast food, we put at a 60% non-payment. And the reason for that is we have, the large chains in there. We have some of the smaller restaurants that do takeout. So we felt that was the right amount. Healthcare, so physiotherapists, chiropractors are at 80, animal clinics at 80% not being able to pay. So these were the businesses that were really hit hard by the state of emergency not being able to work. So that's how we came up with that amount. Then going down into the landlords, it was commercial with shopping plazas, 75%. Retail is closed, and so a lot of these are the strip malls that are there. So some of them, depending on the mix of business in the strip mall, some are open, some are closed. So we just took a factor of that. Apartments with 4 units plus, we took 25% non-payment. The reason for that is because there were rent deferral programs brought forward by the federal government and different things. So there were other means to help the apartment owners to make their payments. So it really was geared on those that were hit the hardest. And then on homeowners, we just assumed a 25% non-payment based on what we were seeing in income. So that's how we came up with that number to make the full $188 million. To Councillor Mason's motion, the next piece of work that we need to do, and what we would be coming back with a different staff report, would be looking at the tax data that we have now. So who's been paying their bills, their tax bills, what the gap is, taking that and then trying to determine what the operating line of credit is, or the short-term borrowing is that we would need to take out to bridge that gap, that cash flow gap.
And I know, just remind me again how the urgency is, when this has to be in by, the application for the.
Oh, so it'll be, it's on each council's discretion. So I would be bringing back a staff report. It would be after we have the June 1st tax payments in, so that we would have some time to do an analysis. And then I would be asking for authority to borrow up to the certain amount. Under the program with the Municipal Finance Corp, currently you can only borrow once. So we would need to get a good understanding of what the impact is for the full year.
Okay, thank you for that understanding and the urgency as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still getting, you're not coming across completely clear consistently, at least in my, so I think Corey's on his way on a mission of mercy again to see if we can find any other solutions. Make sure you keep your distance, but thank you.
I was going to say, well, jump out of the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I got a note here, John, to speak to process, but that's from a while ago, I think, John. I'm pretty sure.
Correct.
Yeah. Councillor Outhet?
Thank you, Mayor, and I want to begin by saying that I certainly support, I don't know if we're calling this an amendment or a deferral for a staff report, but I certainly support what Way is proposing, and full credit to him and those who worked on this to come up with some solutions to a situation where I think we saw yesterday that there wasn't a whole lot of appetite for the proposed changes to police and to fire. But other than with the exception of Paul, who did make a suggestion about transit technology, everybody else said, well, don't raise taxes, don't touch the reserve, don't touch debt, but don't touch fire and police. So but that's not how it works. And let's increase spending on transit as well. So I commend folks for bringing this forward. I would have supported Steve Adams's motion today as well. I don't think that we should say anything yet that this means that we don't support a hiring freeze, some proposed layoffs and whatnot. I don't think we should look at this as any more than an expressed desire to having staff look at some possible solutions to our concerns about particularly fire and police. And I'll certainly be supporting that. But let's not take this too far and say that that doesn't mean there won't be any freezes, any layoffs, any of the other things that Jacques and team have proposed. This is just somebody who's come along with some possible solutions that we would like to get an opinion on. So my 2 cents, Mayor, and thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure, Corey, if you want to respond to that. No, just kidding. I think everybody else who wants to speak that I have on the list has spoken once. I want to address a couple of things. Laura Lee, in terms of looking at the HR, we can do that for sure. And Jacques is suggesting we'd be prepared to talk about that perhaps at next week meeting. I want to just echo what Tim is saying, that supporting this motion doesn't mean we support every part of it. It means having a look at some of the options. I think it's a good motion. And I think we have to take a kind of a hard look at some of these issues that are in front of us. And I would support many of the decisions of staff. But I think it's worth having a look at. And I certainly want to have a look at and a really common understanding when it comes to the reserves. And I agree very much with Councillor Stretch that, you know, reserves that we have are generally for capital items. But it's also, if you're saving them for a rainy day, if you look outside, it's pouring right now. We haven't had rain like this in my lifetime. And so I think it's incumbent upon us, especially looking to other orders of government, to make sure that that we're doing everything that we can to show that we're serious about using our resources. So I'm interested in that. It doesn't mean I support everything, every single item. So I think Councillor Outfit, you made a good point there, and I wanted to echo that. I have a couple of folks to speak again. Councillor Whitman.
Thank you again, Mayor Savage. I'm really heeding the CIO's warning here about the delays, and he's been pretty clear that this could potentially get us into July, and we want to have this done in June. I guess a question for staff, I'm wondering what could have changed to make this motion usable right now, because that doesn't seem to be an applicable motion unless you think something has changed, like we've received some good news or something. Any of these decisions can be looked at 6 months down the road, the hiring freeze, the cuts, all these things, which I think were all necessary, they can be looked at later. So what has changed from the last time Jacques looked at all this to today to make many of my colleagues want to support that?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, I'm not so sure whether it's a question of what's changed. You know, the staff advice that you received is the advice that you received based on the information, based on all the information that we have and professional judgment associated with a go-forward plan, based on what we knew last week and up to today, I suppose. You know, this will be a dynamic process. The motion is operable to the extent that it will help us frame up a report back to council in terms of all of the parking lot items that will end up on the list, including this one, that we will then come back to you and say, okay, here's the advice that we will give you, and then it's up to council to make its decision, really. So at the end of the day, you know, we'll take the direction from council. We will come back with a staff report and move forward. You know, there are some factors that will change going forward, I would guess, as we move through day to day and week by week, right? So right now, there's things that we don't know. For example, how much support will come from the federal government and what additional support may come from the provincial government. But we'll take all that into consideration, and whatever we know by the end of next week, that will be worked into the staff report, and all of the direction that council has asked us to consider further direction, we'll incorporate that as well and move forward with a final recommendation to you for your consideration.
Thank you. So I'm wondering what has changed. I know that you're going to keep us up to speed when you hear from the feds and from the province, but what has changed to make this motion necessary today or valuable?
Well, what's changed is somebody's popped a motion onto the floor of council, right? So
Thank you.
And that's everybody has a right. Every councillor has a right to pass motions, and staff's obligation is to respond to them once approved by council.
Thank you, Jacques.
Thanks.
Councillor Austin. You on mute, Sam?
Trying to get off mute, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, geez. Sometimes that bar is just the lag, it won't pick up. So, I mean, this budget, I mean, this is not any different than what we've been doing with any of our budgets. We get a staff recommendation, and you know, that is the best professional staff advice. But then it's our job as councillors to take that advice and tweak, change, accept, right? You know, that's the political, that's what we're here for. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with what this motion is. To me, this is about looking at options, looking at some potential alternatives. And if something comes back, we could very well tinker with that, yet still, that is why we are here. That is our role as representatives. So this is entirely in order. The piece I just wanted to comment on again is the reserve portion, because I had the opportunity to have a brief conversation with Ms. Fraser before the meeting, because we had the sheet that went around to us showed a projected balance March 31st, 2020 of 183, and then a projected balance in the reserves for March 31st, 2021 of 205. So it certainly looks like we are adding more to savings than we are. I've been told since that piece really didn't take into account the surplus, and that we are actually withdrawing down our reserves this year as part of the staff recommendation. So there's maybe not as far to go on reserves as it first looked, as that when that sheet went around. The part that I did do, where I do think there is potential on reserves, is strategic capital reserve. Of course, as you know, we are funding strategic capital comes from land sales, and I think it's 1 cent on the rate that goes into it. And that's projected to grow from 32 to 44 million, at least in the sheet that I had here. I mean, I think that's money that potentially could be freed up, because that is the long-term savings for things like a new police station, library capital plan, the stadium, all these kind of big ticket capital projects. And when you're faced with a crisis that's the worst since at least 2008, maybe since, as our CEO said, since 1929, you know, I think this is hunker down, like those really big capital items. I think there is room to potentially not be stashing money away for those particular items at this point in time where, as you say, Mr. Mayor, it's absolutely pouring out there. So I think that in Councillor Mason's motion, when it comes to reserves, is the place that I would go, and I just wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I feel I have to after hearing some of the comments. You know, I'm very pleased with Councillor Mason's motion, just so that we have staff to go away in their best professional opinion and come back, and so that we have a couple of options. Staff's initial recommendations, and there are no decisions made. It's staff's job not to make decisions. Staff's job is to provide us with recommendations, which they did. And now we have a councillor who's brought forward other options, another avenue to go at, which makes perfect sense. There's no decisions made here. And Councillor Whitman, I'm a little surprised at his comments about, you know, what's changed. Nothing's changed. This is the process. These are critical decisions, probably in my short time in council, probably the most important decisions we've ever made when it comes to finances and budget that we've ever made. So I support the idea of another set of another option, another lens to look at it. When it comes back, we'll have that debate. I realize there's a time constraint and deadlines, but there's no use in pushing forward just with the first set of recommendations to bring forward. So I support this, and I ask my colleagues to support this, and we can have the debate when they both come back to the table. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor. I think everybody has spoken except for Councillor Mason to close. I'm just checking the list. Any last opportunity people want to speak to this before Councillor Mason? Councillor Mason.
Wow, that lag. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, staff. So I think Councillor Austin and Councillor Mancini actually covered much of what I was going to say. I don't know why my camera's not working, but I see it's not on, but I'll just carry on if that's all right. You know, the staff are the advisors, but council are the deciders. Our job is to accept or modify or reject staff's recommendations. And a lot of that comes down to our risk tolerance. So I understand what staff are saying, and but I think when you listen to what the councillors are saying right now, they are willing to take a little bit a different approach to handling this risk. Part of that for me came, you know, and we were talking about what's new and what's changed. Well, that labor force survey for April that came out on Monday, or came out on May 8th, pointed out that, in fact, most of the job loss in Nova Scotia hasn't been in HRM. 90% of the job loss has been in the rest of Nova Scotia. So our understanding of the impact of this situation is evolving daily and hourly. And so for me right now, I think that understanding if we can take a different approach, if we can retain those staff and continue with those community grants and support our valued community partners, support volunteer firefighters, and then we can have a look at it again in October and reassess. I want to ask staff as our advisors, I know you don't want to do it, guys. Folks, what would that look like? How can we best achieve that? And that's what this motion does. So I also want to be absolutely crystal clear for the media who are following along that this motion does not undo any of the layoffs that have already been announced. This is talking about on a going forward basis, talking about vacancy management and talking about the keeping those, having that hiring freeze. So, and this motion only addresses operating, not capital. As the mayor said, we'll have to come back and we'll have to have a further conversation about capital. So I thank you for the debate, colleagues, and I look forward to your support on the motion.
Okay. Thank you for that. I see no other names on the board, so we're voting on the motion of Councillor Mason as seconded by Councillor Adams and thirded by Councillor Clary. And we're going to do a roll call vote to record it. Even though
can I ask one more question before we go vote, please?
Go ahead, Councillor. Go ahead, Councillor.
The motion talks about taking capital out of operating, and then we should probably look at trying to fund that through capital debt instead. And with the all-time low interest rates we're now being offered to the governments, how much would that be an advantageous opportunity for us to take advantage of these low interest rates and perhaps have a lower debt payment for our capital projects this year? I know there were some answers earlier about, are we leveraging ourselves too much on the debt, but taking that 20 some odd million out of operating and putting it back into capital financing at a longer period of time to pay it back, I think it's much easier than trying to pay back a short-term loan for the province. So could I get a little clarification on the pros and cons of trying to do that, please and thanks.
Jane, if you could,
Yeah, I should be set up now, Mr. Mayor. Can everyone hear me okay?
yeah, please, that's great. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Corey will be happy. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. So there's really two things here. One on the capital and looking at debt, we can absolutely do that. What we would do is we would look at the projects and make sure that they're suitable for debenture financing under the provincial rules and all that sort of thing. So we can do that, and what we'll do is we'll model out what that means over the 10 to 10 year payback schedule. So we can certainly do that. The other one on the short, and that obviously that borrowing will be higher than 1.1%, but it won't be hugely expensive. Because capital money is quite cheap now. The other thing on the short-term loan, that really is bridge financing for operating. So what we want to have with that is some flexibility on when we pay it back. So there would be the two things. So the analysis that we're going to do on the amount that we need for short-term borrowing is to see exactly how much we think we're going to need to borrow. From the province. That will have a 3-year payback period as a maximum. We do have the option to pay it back earlier in the event that things are better than we think. So those are the couple of the strategies that we would employ in looking at this, and these would have been the things that we would have looked at as going forward after we went through the budget presentations and the debates to figure out the best mix to close any gap that we have. So I hope that answered your question, Councillor.
Thank you, it does.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jane. Seeing no other speakers, Cheryl, let's call the roll.
Councillor Stretch.
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten. Councillor Karsten.
I know that Councillor Karsten had some meetings to attend as well.
Councillor Nickel.
Yes.
Councillor Austin.
In favor?
Councillor Mancini.
Yes, for the motion.
Councillor Mason. Councillor Mason. Councillor Smith.
Yes.
Councillor Cleary.
Yes.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Zarowski.
Yes.
Councillor Whitman.
No.
Councillor Blackburn.
Voting yes on the motion?
Councillor Russell.
Against the motion?
Councillor Outhead.
Yes.
And Mayor Savage.
Yes.
Councillor Mason, are you available there?
Can you go on camera and put thumbs up?
Anyway, I don't think he's present.
He just said for the motion on chat.
Yeah. Is that legal?
He's obviously having a problem with his mic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's indicated.
Not this mic, his mic. Yeah.
So can you just make
His mic will not come on. I think we'll count him as a 4 because he's indicating in everything except smoke signals that he is in favor of it, so.
Not
I have
so
a
much
sense
with the Donald.
Twisting himself in knots trying to vote for the motion that he put forward. Okay, the motion carries. Okay, now let's just take a second, colleagues, and see where we are. So that's the motion. We have a couple of options. We can go into the departmental ones. Are there still questions of high-level discussion on the budget that people have? Councillor Mancini, you completely disappear when you duck down. All we see is Shuby Canal. Look at that. Well, then I think
Mike, it's Tim here.
Tim?
I think we still have some. I certainly still have some high-level questions regarding the capital budget, rather than the operating. So if there's a chance of talking capital today, that would be appreciated. Thanks.
No, we're going to do capital, I think, next week, because we do have the department heads lined up. And so we're going to hear from them on operating, and then we will address capital. Give them a chance to prepare for that. Jacques, is that right? We have folks here prepared to discuss operating?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, but if there are questions of capital, of a capital nature to any business unit director, they're certainly prepared to answer those today if questions is asked.
Okay.
If there's a high-level discussion about capital, we should schedule another time, but specific questions to the capital within each business unit as directors come up would be appropriate as well.
Okay, so Councillor, maybe Councillor Nicol.
So it's just a question with regards to urgency, because I realize that there's contract issue with the green bin. So when are we going to be discussing that? I know that that's why Brad is here, I think, available for us to go into that discussion.
That's a good reminder for that. Yes. So Jacques, will we get into that when we discuss TPW?
Yes, I believe Brad and John have worked on a motion. I think Councillor Russell may be putting the motion to the floor. I'm not sure if it's Councillor Russell or if it's Councillor Nicol, but somebody's going to put a motion to the floor on today.
Okay, I think I see Councillor Russell has one in line. So, okay then. So Councillor Nicol, you're good. That was your question. Okay. Okay then, Jacques, shall we go into TPW to start off?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
And is Brad with us?
Yes, he is.
All right.
I am.
Welcome, Brad.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
We got you. I think you know a number of the councillors.
I've heard of them, yes.
So the floor is yours if you want to just speak in general terms and then perhaps take a few questions.
Okay, it's certainly good to see everybody, and I'm joined today by a few of my colleagues who are prepared to take questions. So as I understand, my task today is to talk to you about our strategy for reducing costs to meet the targets that were given to us. In doing so, I'll walk you through the strategy, and I'll try and align, I can't align every number, it would take too long, but I'll certainly give you a flavor for some of the cuts that would certainly be of interest to you, and then we'll get into questions. So we certainly had we started with an aggressive target. Of course, that was further exacerbated by some contract inflation that we'd had that would happen in any other year. We have some additional COVID-related costs due to our new procedures. And of course, we had a cut to our operating cost of capital of about $800,000. So all of that added up to give us a pretty stern target. Our proposals today in front of you achieve $7.1 million in operating reductions and $42 million in capital reductions, both reductions in cash flow. So our strategy was pretty straightforward, basically 7 steps. First step, maintain our core and essential services. Second step, restore revenues where beneficial. Third, sustain capital program to keep the economy going as much as possible. 4, maximize vacancy opportunities, minimize overtime to keep employees and sustain productivity. 5, offload all non-essential support and overhead costs. Step 6, defer asset maintenance, but maintain safety at all times. Of course, that has long-term negative effects. And finally, as a last resort, we looked at reducing non-essential services to citizens. So just walking through that strategy, in terms of restoring revenue, essentially we looked at stopping the bleeding on the parking side. So the numbers you see in the presentation show the losses for the first 3 months. And that's because we are proposing that in the month of June and no later than the 1st of July, that we restore all parking fees, fines, and permits. If we don't, that'll represent about another $4.5 million in losses that are not showing in any of the numbers you've seen to date. In terms of revenue, further with the revenue front, we do expect annual losses for our commercial organics and recycling, and we do not recommend proceeding with the 25% increase in the recycling tip fee for the commercial haulers as was originally in the draft budget, again, given the economics. We do expect some losses on our summary offense tickets as well, to the tune of about $500,000 over the course of the year. In terms of step 3, which is sustaining the capital program, this was, and particularly in the streets and roads area, in total, TPW is planning to deliver a $120 million capital plan. That was the original plan. Overall, we've reduced $32 million in capital projects. However, I would stress that $26 million is coming from Cogswell, and the remainder, and Cogswell, by the way, is funded from reserve, and the remainder is coming mainly from overhead, contingency, and other reductions. So we've tried to reduce direct capital impacts to the municipality as much as possible and taken more risk upon ourselves. We've also cash flowed $10 million, in other words, cash deferral. That is pretty much standard practice for us. As you know, we have a staff that tenders all year long. Therefore, the way our budget authority works is we must have the money in the year that we tender the work. So there is always a large amount of work that either doesn't finish at the end of the year because of different factors, and has to carry in the next year, or gets tendered but is delivered in the spring. And again, that's an important component of our program because it gives everybody a quick head start in the spring in terms of their own business planning for the contractors that deliver us our service. I am pleased to say that the project planning and design team under Dave Hughley did transition very well to the new COVID way of working. They're sitting about 40% tendered at this time. We try to be 50% tendered by the end of May, so we're doing well. Obviously, we're nervous that there could be signs ahead, but certainly some of our projects in the street seem to be going in accordance with the schedules we would expect, so we're pleased with that. We're also pleased with our tender prices to date, and we thank our contractors for that. They've been very competitive and within budget. I'll just give you a couple samples of, I guess, important capital projects that are important, would be important to you. We did reduce our road operations and construction capital project, which is basically our state of good repair budget, by $1 million. That is going to minimize our ability to do retaining walls, guide rails, steps, curbs, stump removals, painting, fencing, drainage, all that kind of maintenance that typically you've been used to in your districts will be reduced. In terms of Cogswell, I spoke to that. That is a $26 million just pushed to the right. I can advise that I'm aiming for a report in June to council to give a detailed overview of exactly where we are. I accepted a sponsorship of this project 2 months ago, as requested by Jacques. I'm in the throes of working with the team to finish all the final risks and move this project forward. So again, I look forward to discussing this with you in the near future. Street recapitalization, that's another big project that affects all districts. That's a $36.8 million capital plan. We're proposing, just to give you a feel for what reductions mean, so we were proposing $800,000 in reductions there. So the two major things impacted is that's 4 positions that were proposed for our business unit that we will not be moving forward with due to the hiring freeze. And that also allocated $400,000 to move forward with the non-accepted streets and roads work in terms of survey and title search. So we've off-ramped that. We're recommending off-ramping that. So that's $800,000 over the reduction in that account. And then we're cash flowing or deferring $3.4 million. But again, that is something you're very familiar with, and it's just part of the way the money moves. The other one that I know has caught some councillors' eyes and citizens' eyes is road safety improvement. We bundled that account to give us more flexibility to do things and respond faster to the public in terms of road safety. That is a $3.1 million total capital plan. It has a proposed $870,000 reduction. However, I'd stress that that $870,000 reduction is a result of some advanced purchasing that we did last year. For instance, on our rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So we don't have to spend that money this year. We've got it in inventory. We're going to take some deferred maintenance in this area, and we reduced our contingency. Basically, the only shiny thing, if you will, we wanted to get on with an intersection upgrade at K and Yonge. However, that was a $50,000 item. We're not able to get on with that due to some misalignment with Halifax Water at that intersection. However, it remains in the budget for future. So again, I want to stress we're maximizing delivery to citizens when it comes to capital budget. All right, in terms of step 4, minimizing vacancy and maximizing vacancy and minimizing overtime. That's a $2.4 million reduction. That results in 74 positions that will not be filled within TPW. You can see from the layout in their presentation that comes in the form of 21 summer seasonals, 15 students, 10 winter seasonals, our capital positions, as well as vacancy that we had at the time the decision was made to basically freeze. So that's 74 positions. Where that results in for us is obviously for maintenance, that'll be increased response times and the potential that service standards won't be met. It will push us to a focus on priority 1 requests only, which are basically safety requests across the board. And in terms of winter seasonals, you know, the impact there, a lot of the handwork, additional handwork that we did in the core this year to really try and help with mobility, of course, that'll impact our ability there. So that just gives you a sample of what those 74 positions mean to us. In terms of step 5, which is offload all non-essential support costs, certainly travel, training, memberships, professional fees, office expenses, special projects and studies, it's about $500,000. Just to give you a sense of special projects and studies, for instance, we won't move ahead with the parking supply and demand study as we had planned. And another sample would be we're proposing to reduce the community monitoring committee budget by $20,000 from $90,000 to $70,000, just based on their past spending. So that just gives you a sample of what's in that category. In terms of deferring maintenance, that adds up to about $1.9 million. We're proposing to reduce our road operations and construction contracts for $330K. That's asphalt and concrete repair, that's arborists, that's excavations, etc. We will reduce our equipment materials by $200,000. We will not proceed with any tree planting this year. That's a $900,000 item, and reduce our pruning by 20%. Our position there was that we should really focus our money on the assets that we do have in the right of way and continue to maintain them. Therefore, we were concerned about putting more assets in the right of way in form of trees that we would not be able to maintain in the future. So that was the decision there. That tree count, that 900,000 would have resulted, we thought originally it'd be 1,800 trees, but based on the new prices, it would be more like 1,300 to 1,400 trees. In terms of pavement marking, that is a bit of a confusing number in your presentation because it looks like we're actually increasing line painting or pavement marking. The reason why that number is a bit odd, it's 85,000. It's because all of our contracts went up. As you know, we've had a lot of problems with line painting contracts. We rewrote the contracts to be basically have more severe consequences. And to get the job done, we also made sure that one contractor could not get all the work. Long story short, the cost went up. That wasn't entirely surprising to us. So to offset those costs, we're proposing that we only paint the crosswalks and stop bars, basically all our transverse lines, once this year. And the reason for that may seem counterintuitive, but the reason for that is we're just not seeing the traffic, and we're counting on the lines holding up longer. You'll see in many areas of the city, some of the line painting is already well underway. We're proposing this, our center line painting that our staff do. We'll only do those arterials and major collectors. Won't do the locals, for example. And we'll let the rainbow crosswalks, we won't touch them this year. They're in pretty good shape, and let them ride. We'll also defer about $200,000 in traffic maintenance work, contract work. So that's how they get to that net number of $85,000. We didn't quite get over the $400,000 increase in our contracts, but we battled most of that back. In terms of step 7, the final step, which is, our last resort, was to reduce direct service to citizens. Here we are proposing to go without weekly green cart service this year. That's an item worth $1.15 million. As you know, we're asking council to give us direction today. Thanks to the solid waste staff, they did work with the haulers. Normally we have to give 2 months notice to on-ramp that service. We got extension till November 15th. They can't go any further for a July 1st start. So that's why we're looking for that direction today. The haulers have been very good with us under the circumstances. We're proposing that Household Hazardous Waste Depot stay closed until October, but then, stay closed till end of September and reopen in October, and all mobiles be canceled for the year. That's almost $500,000 savings. We're also proposing that CFC removal continue to be suspended until October. That's $45,000 savings. In terms of public education, we're proposing $275,000 increase in our solid waste $275,000 decrease in our public education work. That's reducing our solid waste ads and campaigns, withdrawing our printing of the waste sorting guide, for example. Finally, we're also proposing that we cut the snow removal for seniors program. 2 key areas there. One, this is a unique program that is a direct substitute to private property, and as well, our contract with the YMCA had ceased. So we need to find a new service provider, but I can tell you that we certainly believe we can if council changes their mind here. If council changes their mind, if council gives us direction to get on with it. So that was a difficult decision. I'll just leave it at that. Of course, there's other items in our chart that you would have seen, the LED reserve and inflation factors. I can certainly go into those if you wish. Finally, I want to stress that we looked at future opportunities as well. We look hard at all of our contracts to see what we could really dive into and try to cut. The bottom line is our contracts, for instance, our snow contracts are very intertwined to give best price. It's very difficult to go in there, break the contract, and yield any possible savings. So therefore, going forward, obviously, as money stays tight as we expect, there are opportunities, I suppose, to look at, for instance, sidewalk service if council so chose, as well as our solid waste contracts. I would advise that we are getting ready to do collection contracts this year. We certainly kicked the tires on bi-weekly recyclables as well. We believe that's an area that could be trimmed back. We also believe that bulky collection could be trimmed back, and there's some other flavors. When we go forward those collection contracts, we expect to price a lot more options. And before we go out with the contracts, what we'll do is commit to come to council to understand exactly what pieces you want to look at in terms of future cost savings. So that's really the overview. I just really want to take this opportunity to thank the citizens for their patience as we've adjusted to our new service life. I definitely want to thank all TPW staff and the unions. for their cooperation in adjusting to a new way of working and maintaining productivity. I want to thank our contractors for their frontline performance and dedication to service. Finally, I wish to thank council. You've been very patient and supportive throughout this process, so thank you. Take any questions.
Thank you very much, Brad, and for your staff. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open up with the motion that was previously mentioned that Brad had talked about as well. And I'd like to move that the Budget Committee direct the CAO to revise the 2020-2021 operating budget to remove weekly green card service and provide notice to affected contractors no later than May 15th, 2020.
Second, Councillor Nicol.
Thank you. And again, the justification for this, as we heard from Brad, is this would be an initial shot in the arm of budget savings of a little over $1 million. And this is time critical. They need to have the answer by this coming Friday. And so while this could ultimately be unfolded once we get back into regional council and give our blessing to the decisions that we make here, I suggest that we move ahead with this anyway. This simply means that there would be bi-weekly collection instead of weekly collection. So I'm going to leave this motion at that and look for comments.
Okay. Comments on the motion of Councillor Russell?
I have one.
Go ahead.
I have one.
Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I kind of thought this motion was going to come out at the end of Brad's presentation so we could ask all the questions, but I guess I can come back from my other 3 questions. I sent Brad an email today about the green card pickup, and in my opinion, we've worked long and hard to use the green cards in the summer because of the smell and the maggots and everything. And since there's a good chance everybody will be home this summer in their backyards or in their side yards, and they're going to be smelling this, I would hope that it doesn't come down to not using the green bin and all that goes back into the regular garbage. So my question for Brad is, has this been given any consideration to it? And if it does go back into the regular garbage, does it do anything with our contract with Miller's if they should happen to get a whole load of garbage which is has green bin waste in it?
Brad?
Yeah. In terms of looking at it, so it's value. So if we just off-ramped September, that would be a $300,000 savings as opposed to 1.15 million. I can tell you that. I'm going to ask Andrew, hopefully he's able to access the call, to just talk about the enforcement aspects of it. I don't expect much challenge there. The reason, obviously the biggest reason we got into this, as you would well be aware, Councillor Walker, is because of the odor. And this originally started in 2005 in the urban areas, and then, of course, expanded for quality reasons across the municipality over the years. And then September was added in about 2016, I believe, 2015-16. So the program has grown over time. And with that, I'm going to ask Andrew if he's able to chime in to just talk about potential enforcement impacts.
Thanks, Brad. I thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. So just a reminder, I suppose, councillor, in the summertime and throughout the year, we alternate between garbage and organics. So it will continue to be an alternating schedule. We have a robust enforcement program. And so we'll continue to work with our contractors to sticker inappropriate garbage, right? If it does contain banned items, we do need to keep on top of that because it could create a challenge for us at our landfill if we are receiving materials that are banned by regulation in the province. So our focus there would be to continue to keep our enforcement program, which is our primary line of defense, is our contractors.
It's kind of hard when it's still in the black bag or if it's in the middle of the clear bag and you don't see it. But as I say, to me, that's the only concern I have, is that the green bins won't be used in those hot months because of the smell and the maggots, because they will be in their side yards and backyards. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. So in terms of questions on the motion, I think I see Councillor Mancini and Councillor Austin. Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've lost focus because now I see Andrew's new handlebar mustache. I don't know where I was, but anyhow, I'll try to refocus. My question is to build on what Councillor Russell was talking about. And, you know, we all know the reason why we have the green bin picked up every week in the summertime. So is there any education, Andrew, around helping our residents to get through this, knowing that that's going to be the case? Do other municipalities use other techniques or, you know, natural techniques, whatever, to try to keep the smell down? Because as Councillor Russell stated, Councillor Walker, I should say, my apologies, stated that it's going to be an issue. So if we're going to do this, and I support it, makes sense financially, but we need to help our residents and educate them on how to keep the smell down.
Thank you through the mayor to the councillor. Thank you for the question. Absolutely, educational component has to be part of this. And so Solid Waste actually has already transformed our educational services online. So we are offering currently webinars to groups and to citizens. So I see a twofold approach here. One is we will have a robust social media campaign to help residents with respect to understanding how to manage their green card in the summertime. So that would be promoting things like, you know, using paper boxboard liners, freezing your waste, how to, you know, clean your green bin, using yard waste, for example, to layer the material that you're putting in your green card, all those good things to help mitigate vectors and vermin. And then the second approach would be that we would offer webinars, like direct education to groups, to individuals, and that certainly would be one of the areas that we would focus on, which is maintaining your green card in the summer months.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, you know, nothing like the financial crisis of COVID to focus the mind on what is really core and essential. And I support this because, and you know, I'm going to do something I don't normally do at council. I'm going to be a little bit anecdotal, but I know my own personal experience of the green bins in the summer is even with the weekly pickup. The thing is, it's never full, right? You know, it's maybe a quarter full. And even though it's getting picked up every week, the thing stinks anyway. So, I mean, I don't know how much value we were really getting out of this anyway, in terms of the difference it would make for people. So I think it is a place that it does make sense to dial this back. For poor Councillor Karsten, he's finally got equal service in Eastern Passage, I guess, if this passes. We're all going to that model. And I think it is important what Andrew referenced there to Tony's question, that we do have some information available for residents so that we can put forward some education pieces about how to minimize that kind of summer smell for those who really do find it objectionable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker on this, or it was different? No, I'm different. Okay. So anybody else on this? Councillor Nicol, are you on this?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. It pains me to have seconded it, but I realize that it is because of the rainy days that we are having currently. That's how we're trying to explain this. So I know that normally PSAs go out with regards to when the weekly green bin pickup starts. So I trust another PSA will go out, but I wanted basically to ensure that it's framed around the unusual and unprecedented circumstances that we're in right now as a means of saving some money. And I know that I was asking Brad earlier if there was some way of you know, I was never really a big fan of adding on the brown yard bags, but there is no means of changing that now because it is the grass clippings that makes the most smell in the green cart. So hopefully now that they don't have to put the grass in, that the smells will be limited, and keep their green bins out of the sun also helps. So I just wanted to make sure that the framing of the reason why council is doing this is because it's could be a temporary measure. It'll be something revisited in the future, but the reason why we have to do it, it's not that we like doing it.
Right. Okay. No other questions on this?
Tim here.
Councillor Arthur?
I too.
Thanks, Mike. So just to touch on this, I for those listening and just for added clarification, I would have rather discussed this when we brought the whole budget back at the end of May or early June and see what other mitigating factors we came up with to having subsequent to the motion, the amendment that we passed a few minutes ago. But the other question was, I think Brad mentioned that there'd be 300,000 saving versus 1.2 if we just cut it back in September, which is what I'm leaning towards. And of course, the bins aren't as full because we don't let people put grass in them anymore. But still, I still think they fit quite a bit. So I'd like to understand why, if we just confirm the numbers there on September, because I think we only added September a couple of years ago. We've had weekly pickup for quite a while now on green bins in the summer. We're having hotter and more humid summers. So I'm just wondering why we didn't pursue the September whole summer, if you know. Why do we have to decide today again? Can you just remind me?
Tim, before I go to Andrew, you're fading in and out a bit, Tim. I don't know if there's anything you can do on your end. The video and the audio is kind of a little bit weak. Andrew or Brad?
Yeah, I can answer that, Mr. Mayor. Essentially, it's the target. The target's, we were an aggressive target. We had to offload as much cost as we could. We certainly looked at a September-only solution, but really it came down to, this was felt that this was something that was in a desperate times, desperate measures environment. This is something that citizens would be potentially willing to endure. So it's as simple as that. It's about the money, and that's that. And just to re-emphasize, I hear the end May comment. I get that. I got to stress that we thank the haulers for giving us these extra 2 weeks to even have this conversation, so that council can take a chance at this to decide whether it's part of your savings package.
Thank you. Councillor Hensby, did you say you had a question on this?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Yes, I agree that we should try to reinstate the parking meters and the summer events tickets as quickly as possible.
No, that's not on the motion.
I know, but I'm just saying it's a part of the department. And the thing I'm concerned about is the senior snow removal program being lost. $600,000 being cut out of the budget. This is going to be devastating for the seniors in my particular district. Even though
I'll call the question on the motion on the floor.
I think Councillor Hensby will vote on the motion of Councillor Russell, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Just green cards only, or the department?
This is green cards.
Green cards only. That's fine.
Yep.
I'll
come back to.
I have bears eating that stuff.
Okay. I'll go to Councillor Russell to close unless there's anybody else. Before I go to you, Councillor Russell, is there anybody else on the amendment? Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. When I was looking at this and when I was asked to do it, I was looking at this as a one-year thing, as something that we would see being done, because we do have to cut the costs as much as possible. And I recognize that this is an inconvenience for a lot of people. It is unfortunate there will be smell, but it is an inconvenience and it is not critical. It is not something that falls under what I was seeing earlier as health and safety, food security, or shelter. Some people might say that it falls under health and safety, especially with David Hensby. Now, Councillor Hensby, if you share those bears around the rest of the municipality, that might be able to take care of it for us as well. But I'm not sure that would be a wise idea. But I see this as the first kick at saving some money through the budget, the $1.1 million, and we absolutely need a decision to go forward by May 15th. So I look for everybody's support in this, and hopefully we will come out of this too unscathed. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask one question before the vote? In regards to the green card collection, I do have a significant bear problem experiencing now in Lake Echo in the mobile trailer park there, Mountain View and Circle Drive and Bumpy Lane. We're right now experimenting with the Department of Lands and Forestry with the bear lock bin attachment. My only concern though is having green card collections to 2-week cycle in that particular area. It's going to be more of a allurement for the bears because of being more of a smell and more issues. So, talk about health and safety aspects. I am concerned about the attraction of wildlife to this particular area. So, how will we address that particular problem if it becomes a health and safety issue with interface with wildlife?
Any thoughts, Andrew?
I think it's Mr. Mayor, it's Brad. I think, you know, we would work with Lands and Forestry as always. So that's as simple as I can say. I mean, we basically get the calls quickly from the residents, either through 311 or direct to our solid waste lines, and we work with Lands and Forestry to deal with those issues as we have. And I'm glad to hear that the work's gone forward on the locks. So. Unfortunately, I don't have a great answer because we don't carry that service.
The only other response could be is either to shoot the bears or trap and relocate. You know, I hate to say me being a Bruins fan, but anyway, it's just that I think that those are other options we may have to explore. But this has been a very frequent issue in this particular part of Lake Echo, and so we'll monitor it closely.
Thank you. Councillor Adams is wanting to see the amendment. Is that something that can be put on the screen?
Would Councillor Adams be okay if I shared it in the chat?
Yes. Speaking on behalf of Councillor Adams, I'm sure he would.
The essence of it is in the chat now, and it is that the Budget Committee direct the CAO to revise the 2020-21 operating budget to remove weekly green cart service and provide notice to affected contractors no later than May 15th, 2020.
Okay. Hearing nobody else wanting to speak on this, we're going to call the roll, Cheryl.
Councillor Stretch.
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
Councillor Carson. Councillor Nicol.
Yes.
Councillor Austin.
In favor.
Councillor Austin, can you say that again?
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Mancini.
Yes, for the motion.
Councillor Mason.
I'm for the motion, and I was glad to hear Spirit is for the motion as well.
No, sorry, that was Finnegan. My apologies.
Councillor Smith.
For the motion.
Councillor Clary.
Yes.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Zarowski. Councillor Whitman.
Daisy and I are for the motion.
Councillor Blackman.
Voting yes on the motion.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you. I just want to say that it's good to have a take your pets to work day. Working from home seems to be all that way. I am for the motion.
Councillor Outhit.
Voting no.
And Deputy, no, and Mayor Savage.
For the motion.
So that is 12 in favor and 2 against.
Okay.
13 in favor and 2 against.
So 2 didn't vote. Councillor Karsten.
And councillors Zarowski.
Okay. Councillor Zarowski, we didn't hear from you?
Don't think he's here.
Okay. The motion passes, and just in terms of communication, Brad, would it be you or Andrew that calls my wife and explains my vote on that?
Andrew.
It rolls downhill. Okay, thank you very much. That passes. So, Councillor Russell, thank you for that. We'll get back to you again. I know you're on your list. Councillor Walker, you had a question for Brad generally?
Yes, I did. And I guess I'll start with the line painting. What streets will be done? And are the ones that are being done now that won't be done?
Okay. Basically the in terms of the transverse markings, which are basically your stop bars, your crosswalks, everything will be done.
Okay.
Typically in the core, we try to do it twice. Of course, with the problems we've been having in this contract, that hasn't been happening, as certainly the core councillors would know. What we're suggesting is that based on the reduced traffic, we'll paint them once. So that's what we've planned for in that pavement marking budget reduction. That's for the transverse markings. In terms of the center line markings that our staff do, what we're proposing is to just basically do the major collectors and the arterials. And that, because basically the center lines are in pretty good shape everywhere else. Obviously, where it's our staff, we can flex if we find a local road or a minor collector that's center line is in poor condition. We can take action on that. But we're giving you the general sense that we're going to try and tough it out based on the reduced traffic without jeopardizing safety to the maximum extent possible. That's the planned reduction with the paint. Other than that, the crosswalks, as I said, the rainbow crosswalks, we're going to try and ride out the year on without having to refresh or add new rainbow crosswalk markings.
So if we get a line on a street which is there now and it's in bad shape, we can email, right?
Yes.
And the second thing is in the senior snow removal, having a little bit of problem with this. We're trying to keep as many seniors in the home as possible so they won't have to go to a nursing home, especially under the conditions we live in today. And I don't think this is going to help them by taking this away to let them stay in their homes. And they may have to move out because they may not be able to get this or have somebody do it for them. So I'm a little concerned about losing this service, and I'll leave it at that at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Austin?
Okay, I think I'm off mute. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad, just a couple of questions. Did I hear correctly when you were saying on the capital piece that generally when you were crunching that budget that you avoided cutting any of the proposed street recaps that you had on the list?
Yes.
Okay, great. So my next question, street sweeping. And this kind of goes from, for me, from green bins in terms of there's nothing like some time like this to focus the mind on what's really core. Of course, in Dartmouth, we get the street sweeper comes through, once every, I think it's twice a year it's done. But the peninsula has a much elevated level of service, which I think makes sense on some of the really busy sections. But I've always kind of, personally, I've wondered if it's really necessary at that level. Is that a place that we looked at for savings, or are there any?
We have, Street sweeping in general, because of our new procedures, has been slowed down a bit. Okay, because of our new COVID procedures. That's just an overall factor. Yes, the service standards are, it's pretty much a Peninsula service standard. But bottom line is the only street sweeping change that we've mentioned here is that we've cut the overnight enforcement contract, again, to save money. That will affect our operations somewhat and how efficient they are. But again, we were looking for any savings without, jeopardizing the overall maintenance of the right of way and our environment. So the street sweeping program remains intact, albeit a little bit slower than it has been in the past.
Okay, so it's not a place where there's potential savings by reducing that standard from, I think it's every 2 weeks, to something else then.
We could certainly look at it. There wouldn't be much in terms of, we've got the equipment. It's really down to fuel and the way we arrange our staff. So there's not much to be saved there. We were really looking for the big numbers.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, if it's a drop in the proverbial bucket, because it's basically all baked in already, not much to do there. Household waste. Did I hear correctly saying that the actual depot, the mobile ones are of course not on, but the actual depot out in Bayers Lake won't be open until September?
We're recommending that it open in October. In October. And again, the original decision to off-ramp that service was in line with public health directors and the amount of handling that is required. So again, we're banking on restrictions being loosened to the point where it makes sense to put that back into play. Obviously, we did look at potentially removing it for the whole year. We just believe that's too much risk for too much to endure for our citizens and too much risk to our environment. So,
well, I think even just by leaving it to October, I mean, I understand that we have the health pieces to consider, but I mean, there's only so long someone's going to sit with that paint can or those batteries before they just end up in the black bag and off to Otter Lake to be hopefully found by our sorters right there. Trees, I mean, I've championed trees, I think, every budget year so far, so that one really pains me. But I understand where we're at and that it's an easy one to pare back. What happens with our staff in the forestry section? Because we do have some skilled employees there that have specific skills when it comes to forestry. It's, is that a place where there has been impacts? Or we anticipate vacancy?
Certainly there is, I believe, some vacancy. I don't have the exact numbers for that division at my fingertips, but there certainly would be some vacancy in positions. But otherwise, they stay very gainfully employed. There are all kinds of priority requests that they handle on a frequent basis, so they will be very busy. The planting and the pruning that I referred to earlier is largely contract driven. So that's where the impact will be felt there, is in the contractual side of the house.
Okay, it's like I said, it's personally, it's one that I feel is really important. So it sucks that it's here on the cutting list, but I understand the situation that we're in. And it's also one that as long as we retain that staff capacity, we should be able to ramp it back up again once we start to come out of this. So yeah. I will focus energies on forests down the road rather than in the here and the now. Yeah. I probably burned through 5 minutes, so I'll circle back for my other 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So colleagues, we got a number of people still, but we're going to hear from Wei and Tim, and then we'll take our break. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ditto on the trees. Councillor Austin basically summed that up beautifully, and I have nothing further to add. The senior snow removal, I know that's a weird legacy program that probably, when you look at, what would we adopt that now? No, but we adopted it then, and people rely on it now. And I don't know what a lot of those people would do, especially given it's, as I recall, it's income driven too. So I feel like that is something that we need to continue. The Cogswell delay, I think that makes sense given that the final land transactions have not closed, is my understanding, is the primary delay. And given all that, for cash flow purposes, pushing off a start date to April next year rather than starting in September at the end of construction season when, I mean, we could be demolishing all winter. But I will say on Cogswell and Spring Garden Road, something I've heard quite clearly from people who live downtown or have businesses downtown is they really hope the city can avoid starting all those projects just as life is starting to return to normal, so that whatever businesses have managed to survive this chaos aren't faced with sidewalks being torn up and the ability to get downtown to be impaired at that point. I mean, that is definitely something that I'm hearing is, please don't delay all these major downtown capital projects that have been on the books for years until we're trying to restart the interest in people coming downtown. So I don't really, but I understand delaying Cogswell, and we never really had any intention. It's been really clear that Dresden and Birmingham would happen this year and Spring Garden would happen next year. So I feel like that is more of a paper adjustment rather than a real timeline adjustment. Brad, a couple of questions on line painting. Have you gotten the equipment in-house so that if and when crosswalks and turning need to be touched up as we go into the end of the summer, are we able to actually do that? I know that was like a cross you had to bear the last year or two, that we just didn't have the capacity to step in when the contractor wasn't able to. And then my other two questions are around minimum grid and AT. We're pushing out some projects there on Wise Road, I understand, and a couple other things to next year or to the potential list. I didn't understand how they got on the deferred for cash flow when they're already 63% funded, or 73% funded rather, by the feds and province. Like, that's already, the minimum grid's already funded by the feds and the province through the PDIF2 bilateral. So there will be no more money forthcoming. I think that's more of a staffing and timing issue, maybe. But if they're being pushed out to next year, we should just tell people they're not happening this year, because I don't think it's a matter of getting federal and provincial money that will trigger it. I think it's staff capacity, which is so my question there is, what is actually happening there, and do we have the capacity to meet our requirements with the feds to get that done in 5 years? And also similarly, Windsor Street Exchange, I saw that's been pushed out. We haven't had an update on that. And I know we have a window for that as well. That's only 9-cent dollars. So it's not like that. Delaying that doesn't save us a whole pile of money either in terms of our cash flow. But if you could just update us on line painting, where we're at with that, with the federal funding for minimum grid and for the Windsor Street Exchange. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Thanks very much, Councillor Mason. To the best of my knowledge, we've got everything we need in-house now to do emergency line painting. If I am wrong on that, we'll double back afterwards and correct myself, but we're good to go there. It's my understanding. And as well, in terms of the AAA bike network, it's primarily funded by feds and province. We're in constant contact with them in terms of helping them understand exactly what our schedule is. We're in regular contact. The cash flowing is just that. Back to my point around having the budget authority. So when we talk about cash flow, we're just basically saying there's certain elements of that network that we don't expect to get constructed this year, i.e. pay out contract costs. However, we do and remain very optimistic that we can get it all out to tender. So that's why you're seeing cash flow.
So just to follow up on that, so your read is that we do have the capacity to deliver that program in the 5-year agreement with the province and the feds?
That's a crystal ball question. Yes, as we sit here today, but I will say, one of our key vacancies was an AT planner. That will impact us. Obviously, we're going to not let it happen on our signature priorities of council, so we will focus our work there. We may suffer some delays elsewhere in the program, but no, we remain committed, and the goal is 5 years.
Okay, and Windsor Street Exchange?
Windsor Street Exchange is still led by Kelly, so I would ask her to handle that piece when she comes forward. I just don't have the latest.
Okay, I'll ask it then. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Mason. Thank you. Councillor Outset.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Brad. So just a few questions, Brad. You're talking about the lines and line painting, and I'm glad to hear that staff will have some flexibility if they do notice some center lines are in bad shape in some non-priority streets. Can you tell me a little bit afterwards on the any improvement on the type of paint? I know we're always looking for new paints and new coatings and that sort of thing. Anything to improve the quality of the paint and its longevity? The second thing, can you tell us a little bit about the contract ranges there? Because we've had a lot of problems the last few years getting things in a timely fashion, and in some cases, I think some crosswalks and sidewalks were missed, crosswalks and stop bars were missed altogether. The next question I have is with the staff changes and whatnot, do you still have enough staff to do plowing and salting and whatnot in the areas that aren't performance-based contracts? So in other words, the areas of the city that are still done in-house by TPW, how are you looking for that next winter with these changes? And last but not least, and I'm getting right down in the dirt here, is we had a hurricane last year, and that hurricane knocked a bunch of trees. We've got rid of the trees, the stumps are still in the ground. And I'm told there's no money to pull stumps out of the ground this year. Can that not be funded somewhat out of our forestry folks or out of any pruning or planting and I'm not criticizing Kevin and Crispin, but I mean, you know, we've got safety issues to some extent as well as aesthetics that we still have stumps that are left over from the hurricane. Maybe there was, I don't know if we got any federal or provincial help for hurricane either, but I am concerned about stumps. I mentioned about the non-PB plowing and then of course the lines. If you just update me on those three things, Brad, I appreciate it.
Sure. I'll go with the line painting, and I think Bev's prepared to handle the snow and stump impacts. So we'll see how that works out. So in terms of the line painting contract, yes, we did set it up so that it would not one contractor could get the whole set of work. So we have 3 contractors, 4 areas spread across 3 contractors. So that we feel we're in good shape there. You asked about paint quality. What we have done this year is we're specifying durable markings in all of our new capital projects. So this is moving out of pilot mode and into a broader application. We felt it was too aggressive to try and go durable all at once. We're still taking inputs from across the country. We're not ready to go there yet, but this is a way of getting a lot of durable markings out there and seeing how they hold up and seeing how we would contract to do durable markings in future. Then I'm going to pass over to Bev, who hopefully will come on and help me with the stumps and your snow question.
Are you saying that I stumped you, Brad?
Yeah.
That was
Bump.
through you, Mr. Mayor, to the counselor. That was just bad. So my understanding is we did pull a lot of stumps from Dorian. We lost about 600 trees. We pulled a great many of those. We have 150 stumps in the queue right now. Most of those were pulled contractor. We don't have the ability in-house to grind stumps down. So this looked like a practical place where we could find some resources where they weren't considered priority 1 impacts. So just last year, if you recall, we just finished pulling stumps from Hurricane Juan. So it takes quite a while to get these out of the ground. So we had just caught up and Dorian hit, so we're back with a backlog. We are, just to back up a little bit, 3 people short and impacted by the hiring freeze in the urban forest group. 3 people on a small team is quite a hunk. One of those would be our lead hand. So you know, we're working around that amidst COVID restrictions that require them to be separated. But they're doing a lot of work. They're lifting their weight. So that's the answer on stumps. If the money is there, we can do it. We would contract that out and we would get it done. If it's not something that staff consider to be a priority 1 hazard. As far as snow goes, we have the capability to run our equipment. The difference with our winter terms not coming on board is that this is the detail work that we paid a lot more attention to this past winter. That was proven in the calls to 311 and the many compliments we got on the increased attention in the downtown peninsula areas, especially around ramps, around some of the tight areas up in the north end where we had trouble 2 years ago. We dispatched hand crews to those areas, so we'll be impacted by that, and we'll really need to step back and reassess how we service those tight areas because the equipment's not perfect. I mean, we don't have people jumping out of the gear and doing the detail work that we've taken a lot of pride in getting done. So that's where the impact will be on snow, is in that detail work, and certainly looking ahead. We don't take that lightly because with the accessibility challenges and the improvements we want to make, we felt that was a real step in a positive direction. So that's how that impacts us.
Okay, well, thank you both. And I think at some point, can somebody send me what it would cost to get those 150 stumps pulled out? And I hope perhaps my colleagues on the peninsula will probably have some real concerns about us backpedaling on accessibility concerns that we've made great progress on if we don't have the crews to do the handwork that you've described, Bev. So it's not a criticism of you or Brad, it's a situational thing that I think we need to discuss, and I hope that they will bring this forward. But thanks very much, Bev. Good to see you, and thanks for the update.
You're welcome. We'll get you the numbers.
Thank you.
Okay. Colleagues, it's time to take a break. It's by my watch almost 10 past 3. Let's come back at 3:25. That makes sense? 3:25, we'll come back. And Tony will be up.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
um,
we're live, I think. Yep.
yeah, I just have to, I have a Dartmouth North COVID-19 meeting. I'll have to step away at 10 to 4, just in case you recognize my absence.
Usually you absent yourself by just moving on your screen and you disappear completely. So,
How's that?
there.
Better? There you go.
All right, thanks, Tony.
Yesterday, he turned his head and only half of him was there.
That's like,
Yeah, that's got to be close to 40 pounds. No comments required, Tony. No comeback needed on a fellow's birthday. Laura, are we?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, all members of council have rejoined the meeting and you can start again when you're ready.
Okay, so just to remind people where we are, we're discussing the budget. We passed a motion from Councillor Mason for a supplemental staff report, and that'll come back next week. I want to test council on the possibility, because we're going to be doing a fair bit of work on this, and you know, I don't think we have to make a decision, you know, in the next 10 days, but we do have a lot of deliberations to do, and I'm wondering how council might feel if we added a meeting this Friday afternoon going into the long weekend, say from 1 o'clock to, let's say, 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Cheryl's excited,
Sure.
I can tell.
Sure.
I don't want to use up the chat line because I'm trying to keep track of the conversation, but if you can just take yourselves off mute, are people generally okay with us adding a meeting at this Friday?
Definitely.
Sure thing.
Okay.
I'll reschedule a couple of meetings, but yes.
Yep, absolutely.
And I will
Jacques?
reschedule some as well, but yes.
Thank you. Jacques, are you with us?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that'd be great.
What time of day?
We'll do 1 o'clock. I mean, I've got a bunch of stuff in the morning if it was the preference, but I think we could do 1 to 4 o'clock on Friday, and if everybody bought a drink with them, we could kick off the weekend, the long weekend, toward the end only. But if we did 1 o'clock, and then Jacques, wherever we are today, we could ask other department heads perhaps to be ready, and I think we may still need to add a meeting or two next week as well, but we can do that as we move along. So Jacques, we'll do 1 o'clock on Friday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We'll get that in, put that in motion. Thank you.
Okay.
Hopefully the fire ban will be off.
Okay, so Brad, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Brad, you're a rock star, man. You and your team.
Okay.
Did you say Victoria's with you?
Yes, she is.
Can I just thank Victoria for a little piece of work she did this week for Northwood? I don't know if she's on the screen or not, but I know Lindell and others would be aware that there was a little bit of work done to help the folks who are working at Northwood, and in her typical wonderful style, she helped us out a lot with that. So thank you very much to Victoria.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Always happy to help.
All right. Okay, we're going to continue our discussion, colleagues. I have Tony, Paul, and David, and others after that. So, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of my questions were asked. I just have a couple of quick ones. First of all, I too, Brad, want to thank the TPW staff and the union through this time. I'm always a fan of the work that your folks do. There was a question about, in your presentation, Brad, I wasn't clear, I only caught part of it. You talked about snow handwork with regard to accessibility. Can you explain that to me, what that is?
Yeah, certainly Bev just went over that in detail, a bit more detail than I did with Councillor Outhit. But essentially, we had the addition of 10 seasonal staff this past winter that did a lot of the detail work, be it in the curb cuts, be it in the bus stops, be it in all those areas where it's very hard to fine polish, if you will, with machine. Certainly that seemed to make a big difference in terms of feedback we got. You know, and it's very important after, especially after an extreme storm where you're getting snow pushed all over the place, and you're also trying to maintain the bike lanes and the passageway and the sidewalk. That handwork is very important. So we won't have access, as it currently stands, we don't have access to those seasonals based on this budget. So we are, you know, are concerned about our standard will kind of drop from what it was this year. But, you know, we'll do our best as always.
So that's unfortunate, and thank you for that clarification, Brad. I mean, you know, we've made a lot of headway when it comes to making our city accessible, and that's an important element that most of us online to take for granted. Is there any kind of a strategy to try to at least retain some sort of attempt to keep those areas clear after a snowfall and buses and such? I don't know what the answer is to that, Brad, but I mean, that's a big gap, and to not have that.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, you know, this was an improvement over previous performance. Certainly, we do our best to keep those areas clear, and that's the way our folks work. Like I say, it's the ability to get in there with a shovel and do our thing. And
are those 10 seasonal, that's their only role? Those 10 seasonal? Is that the only thing that they do?
They do. They're part of our Winter Works program. So they're fully in the Winter Works program, and that's what they do.
All right, so that's a tough one to cut in that. The other one, a lot of questions around the painting, the line painting, and you answered most of those questions. Is there a national standard when it comes to the painting of our crosswalks and intersections? Is there a certain standard on you know, how often you do that, to what extent you allow them to fade before they're painted again, or is it up to every municipality to do it as they wish?
I'm going to ask Tasso to ask if there's a standard on frequency. Certainly each municipality does their own standard in terms of frequency. They do the best they can. Whether there's a national standard, I'm unsure. In terms of for us, of course, we've been trying, the last few years have been very difficult with the contract, and you know, we haven't even achieved you know, one painting of some critical crosswalk lines for schools, for example, by the time they're back in September. And that's just completely unsatisfactory. So we took the measures in this contract to you know, basically mitigate that issue to the maximum extent possible. And as well, we have, I just confirmed, yeah, we did back it up. We do have the equipment in-house that, you know, it's for emergency only. And of course, our staffing levels will be down, but we're prepared to go out there and do what we need to do where it's an urgent situation. I'll ask, yeah, I can get back to you if there's some national standard on frequency. I'm not aware of one.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Russell, I have, followed by David, Sean, and Laura Lee, and then some second rounds. Councillor Russell.
Thank you very much. I believe I'm not muted at this point. I'm wondering about the parking meter fine revenue. We were, this was mentioned earlier, and we have had some instances where we are telling people, looking back a month, where we have said, please don't use the bus. We have not said, please don't use the bus, but we have restricted space on the bus. And so a number of people who are able to are taking their cars to work instead of taking the bus. And this is great because they are using the free parking that we have provided as well. And what I'm concerned about is that we would now reinstitute the parking meters and the summary offense tickets, and at the same time not restore the service on buses. So we would be charging them and not providing an alternate. I'm wondering if there has been any discussion about coordinating that work with potentially a rise in service in transit. I'm going to start with that.
Well, that's a very great question. Certainly, I can tell you our departments are in contact with each other. I do not know the percentage that would be in that situation. What I can tell you is certainly in our conversations with our colleagues across the country, basically one of the regrettable decisions was the decision to go free parking across the board. Basically, every city started to just basically adopt that. And we ran into a lot of problems in the right of way. And some of the challenges we're experiencing now as we try to adapt our curbside services and whatnot, that parking is a challenge. So I'm going to pass the microphone to Victoria, who I think is ready to go to help me out with this answer. Thank you.
Victoria.
Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
We got you, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. Can you hear me okay? It's saying that my mic is not on.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that. So thank you, councillor, for the question. So we have been working very closely with private parking lot operators. We have heard from them that, especially around the hospital, they have opened up their lots for free. Certainly, when there was more inclement weather, the lots were at capacity. We're now hearing that they are not. We're also, of course, monitoring other private lots across the downtown, in particular our own at Metro Park, and they aren't at capacity. And the majority of those lots have either reduced their rates or have opened their lots up for free. So, for example, Waterfront Development is free right now. So we feel pretty strongly that based on use and occupancy in the downtown, we've seen that on-street parking has been heavily utilized, but that capacity in downtown as a whole is probably not there. And so there's a lot of reasons for looking at ramping up parking again and charging for parking, namely to discourage those who are able, now that the weather is better, to walk if they're closer to or use our active transportation facilities to facilitate that. But certainly we are mindful of and very aware that residents are feeling safe using their vehicles right now. And so we're not trying to discourage that, but also being mindful of the impact to revenue so that we can fund other important initiatives for the municipality. But I certainly take your comment about working with transit, and we have, and we continue to do so. We've also had preliminary conversations with them about how we can support them. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm wondering about household hazardous waste as well. We have had, I've got a whole series of questions here. We have had instances recently where people have been dumping hazardous waste. A lot of people are at home now and cleaning up and doing things, and so they are producing more of this than they had in the past. I'm wondering if there are alternatives other than putting it in the green bin, or green bag rather, and just putting it out curbside, which we obviously don't recommend. How much would it cost to reopen the station in Bears Lake and just allow people to drop off their household hazardous waste there? We have the one number that is 1.8 million, but that includes 1.1 for the green cart, which we have discussed earlier. So I'm wondering specifically about that station in Bears Lake.
Yeah, I'm going to look to Andrew to provide the detailed numbers. The number I have is rolled up as well, but I can tell you that with the household hazardous waste depot not opening till October and all mobiles canceled for the year, that's a $485,000 savings. I'll now turn the mic over to Andrew to kind of drill into that number for you.
Thanks, Brad. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Our annual budget for the household special waste program is just under $1 million bucks. Very crudely, half of that is a little less than half is for the mobile events. A little more than half is for the permanent fixed depot. I can't give you an exact number, councillor, but I'm gonna say top of my head, like you're talking every month we operate the permanent depot. You know, it's 50, 60 grand a month, depending on the number of events that we actually hold. So that's roughly the order of magnitude.
Super, thank you very much. And so reopening that and looking forward to October, that would cost us in the neighborhood of $360,000. I'm going with the $60,000 per month and looking at 6 months. So I appreciate that. I would look to put that back on the table as something that is reopened, so that people don't accumulate the household hazardous waste, because I want to make sure that it ends up in the right place instead of ending up in the green bags, or as we've seen out here, ending up in the woods. So,
I'm gonna call time there, Councillor.
Absolutely, I can come back.
We'll come back.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hensby.
Thank you very much. In the same line of Councillor Russell, concerned about the household, special household legal waste depots being cancelled. I'm hoping that once the coronavirus scare passes, or at least opens up a little for some mobility, I think we should have at least 3, maybe 4 mobile depots, one in Bears Lake, one at Halifax Forum, one at the Micmac Mall, and perhaps one on the Eastern Shore or the Muscat Valley. We need to get rid of this material. I'm fearful it's going to end up in the woods, as stated, illegal dumping problems. So I would hope that would be on our reintroduction list, whatever possible. But because I hate to see the cleanup be more expensive elsewhere. So as it stands now, all mobile depots are canceled. Now, what about the Freon removal for refrigerators? How are we going to deal with these large bulky items and people putting them in at the edge of our driveways? And they don't have the orange stickers on them. I hate to see it, but people will be cutting lines and letting that Freon gas go freely into the air, and that's not good for the environment either. So I'm hoping that either that or we engage some private environmental recovery company to take this stuff for us, or at least open up that opportunity to allow the community know that the right thing to do is get rid of the stuff appropriately. So I'm concerned about that. And also, again, with the snow removal program for seniors, I think it's critical that we reinstitute that. I'm hoping the motion that Councillor Mason put forward, that's part of that grant program. My district represents about 25% of that total program because of the amount of seniors I have in my community. To have this program totally lost would be unimaginable. And I know that we don't have a contract particular Muscat Harbor, looking at perhaps coordinating this for the eastern region. Perhaps we can look at having, instead of just one programmer to do it, perhaps we should have 3, one for each of the community council areas, one for the west, one for the central, and one for the eastern region. So I'm hoping that snow removal program will be reinstated as a part of the grants program as the earlier motion. So I want to have clarification on that. Is that $600,000 included as a part of the initial motion?
Just before we go to Brad, Councillor Hensby, there's some kickback at some points when you're speaking. It's a little hard to hear you. I don't know if somebody isn't muted. Brad?
Yeah, I believe the councillor's question is whether the 600,000 is encompassed in the scope of Councillor Mason's motion. I'm going to just refer to Jane or Jock to just advise on that. I assume it is, but I'm not sure.
Jane or Jacques?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think what would be very helpful is if we had an understanding of what is encompassed in Councillor Mason's motion of all the programs that are there. I think part of the exercise of going through this is that it gives us clarity as to what needs to get back to added back to the parking lot to help address that. So if council voted to have this added back, we would certainly put that and track it on the budget list, similar as we always would.
Okay, Councillor Hensby?
I'm fine for that clarification. I'm pretty sure Councillor Mason will be able to provide us a full list. I could probably add a few there myself.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Cleary, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, staff and my colleagues for this discussion. So with regard to this particular department, I just have a few questions for Mr. English. So I notice in here a major savings in the many millions of dollars would be things like sidewalk snow clearing. So can you just let me know right now where we stand with the contracts that we have for performance-based sidewalk snow clearing? Are any of them coming due? Do we have any off-ramps in those contracts if we wanted to get out of them? And what sort of savings could be achieved if we did, either throughout the municipality or in areas that recently received it in the last, say, 5-6 years?
So thank you for the question, Councillor. There is no monies identified in this particular set of recommendations specific to off-ramping sidewalk snow clearing contracts. Certainly that option exists for council going forward if you so choose to give us that direction. We would have to set out a strategy to basically, if you will, disentangle the sidewalks from our combined contracts. So we certainly have contracts coming due all the time, this year being no different. I'm not sure exactly which ones are coming due. However, when we looked at this item, sidewalk snow clearing roughly is about a $7 million program delivered by contractors and in-house resources. And to basically cut it, we could potentially achieve maybe $5 million in savings. One of the things we have to remember is we would have to, in order to ensure mobility throughout the city, we'd have to go back to an enforcement program. We would have to make sure that all curb cuts are being done and bus stops are being done throughout the city. So there's a basic mobility kept in space. It's just not, everything's so combined within our contracts now, they're very efficient. So we would be pulling those apart. Certainly if that's a direction council wants to go in, staff can certainly undertake that work. And we'd be obviously deal with any motion that came forward on that matter.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and you know, if we were to do that, especially looking at the fact that we're not going to have those seasonal workers doing the handwork to keep our sidewalks accessible in the areas where we have machine work, you know, we might want to look at adding some of those folk back as well, where we do have staff doing that. Under other mitigation, it's got training, travel, and memberships. Is one of the memberships included here? Is that our NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials membership?
Yes, it is.
Do you know what the figure on that is?
Yes, it's about, if I recall correct, it's about 15,000 US. So that's about 150,000 Canadian. That's a joke.
Not far off.
So it's about 15,000 US. Obviously, that was you know, that wasn't an easy decision to make, but I will say this, that the majority of our staff that participate in NACTO, they do it to build relationships with their colleagues across North America. Certainly, they do that, and they've done that. So this is temporary. This is not considered, you know, a long-term play. We wouldn't recommend that. But again, desperate times, desperate measures. We think we can go without that membership for a couple of years and use the colleague relationships we have and the knowledge we've gained through NACTO. I will say we still have access to the resources writ large, and so that was the decision there. It's a fairly expensive membership.
All right, I appreciate that, Mr. English. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Councillor Nicol, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brad, you mentioned that you were focusing on maintaining what is currently in the right-of-way, and I just wanted to ensure that contractual deficiencies are going to continue with regards to the tree planting. I know we've reduced tree planting, but there are some that were planted by a contractor in the past that are just stumps and have not been replaced. So it's part of that contract. So I just wondered if those were going to continue.
Certainly, if it's a warranty situation, that's part of our work, and we have the staff to do it, so that will continue, yes.
Okay, thank you. And it's a good thing there isn't a standard for line painting, because District 4, as you know, would have been really poor, really way behind the standard. Thank you for all your work, Brad.
Thank you. I know that there's a light shining behind me. It must have something to do with advanced age. There's nothing I can do. I've closed all the curtains. Okay, so in terms of where we are, I know Councillor Austin, I think, wanted to go again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this is on, oh, there we go. There's quite a delay on this end. So the main thing I just wanted to follow up on with, I'm never sure whether this is you, Brad, or whether it's Kelly. The Sawmill River project in downtown Dartmouth, is that out of your group, or is that more of in Kelly's shop?
That would be in Kelly's shop. It's still at the planning stage and functional design, so that's Kelly's shop. We execute once we have a functional plan to work with.
Okay, so that 2 million reduction that's in the budget, I should raise that when Kelly's presenting, not you.
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll save that one for there. I think you covered it off with Councillor Mason, the AT and your street design. You do have vacancy there. Is there an impact on our ability to do complete streets?
Look, it's a great question. It's a crystal ball question. In terms of, and it really speaks to the scope of time you're referring to. We feel very confident about our ability to deliver this year. We feel we're still intact. Our staff engages in a lot of longer term planning, of course. So where it catches up with us is being, if you will, shovel ready in future and advancing the plans for future. So our focus right now is getting the contracts to the street and the work out the door. We feel that's largely intact. Obviously, these vacancies will catch up to us at some point. But again, it's anybody's guess just exactly where these financial situations are going to take us and what our capital plans are looking like in future. So it's perhaps a poor answer, but it's a day at a time scenario.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, my concern is I just know how long the hiring timeline is in government to get somebody in to fill these vacancies once we're at a point where we want to ramp up. I know it's not a snap your fingers and there we instantly have a new AT or street design professional in there to fill the need that we have. And so I have some concern about that. I'll just echo Councillor Cleary about NACTO. I mean, the idea of professional associations is everyone buys into them and we all contribute towards them. If everyone just took the response of, well, times are tough and now I'm going to bail out of the association, we would cease to have professional associations. So that's not one that I'm overly fond of. And I could just question on procedure for, I don't know, Mr. Mayor or the CEO or John Traves, with Councillor Mason's motion. Are we still looking to build parking lot items, or are we looking to, like when Councillor Mason's motion come back, will it hit on a lot of these things? Because his was kind of broad.
It's
John?
Mayor, I would suggest it, given the broad nature of the initial motion that started the parking lot, if there's a specific item you want addressed, I would suggest that you move an amendment to the parking lot to add that item into it with the view that it would come back as part of the final deliberations.
So in the absence of us moving, like if we don't move anything to the parking lot and we're just left with Councillor Mason's motion, what does that then mean for staff taking a look? Is the conclusion, well, Council didn't want us to add anything back? Or is it then that you guys would take a look at your whole budgets?
Can I make a point of order on this?
Yeah.
Point of order, Councillor Mason.
So the motion is quite clear, right? If you look at table 3, page 9 of the staff report, it says that there's a whole list of budget reductions, and what the motion addresses is 3 of those items: compensation, programs, and grants. And it says, come back with all compensation that isn't a layoff, come back with all programs and all grants. So it's redundant for us to make motions again if it's in those 3 buckets, because that's already been directed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
The only reason I suggesting, looking at adding of these as specific items is it's challenging, I think, for council then to break down. It's either an all or nothing proposition potentially at the end of the bucket list. Now, it's council's decision. If you want to get specific around different grants or programs, if based on the advice of staff, you're not prepared to take the whole route, that's fine. But you run the risk that you may miss one of these programs that we're discussing today, or a grant in terms of the final deliberation. If council decides in its wisdom that it doesn't want to reinstate all grants and all programs, it's just, you might miss something if you haven't made a note of it in some way. But Councillor Mason's correct. It's all grants and programs. But
I think it could be solved by having, I'm sure there's a master Excel list that came up with that number of 6,538,000, and that should just be in the staff report that we got. What is that number? What is the other number? And then we'll know what we're voting on.
It's up to council.
So where does that leave us with Councillor Austin? Will we wait till the report comes back and then adjust the report if necessary, John? Or are you suggesting that we should add specific things to it?
I guess, Mayor, I'm suggesting that without keeping track of specific grants or programs, that council, in the alternative to moving a motion to reinstate all grants and programs, if you run the risk that staff has not captured each of these specifically as we go through them. That is the nature of it.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, based on what Councillor Mason has said and what Councillor Austin is asking, I would be surprised if the funding for NACTO is captured under those 2 items. They would probably be under training. So absolutely, we will get a list of everything that's compiled in the programs and grants bucket for sure. But I would think that NACTO would be in a different category.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I was going to weigh in on this too. That is exactly my position. NACTO, unless directed by council to bring it back in the parking lot and deal with it under a parking lot item, we're assuming it's out, right? That's the budget submission. So we're not interpreting that to be a program. That's simply a membership that we've suggested be removed for, as Brad said, for a temporary period of time.
Okay, so where does that leave us then if Councillor, where did he go? Councillor Austin wanted to...
I'm still here. And
Yeah.
I think the clarity on this point is useful. I'm not going to advance the NACTO because I fundamentally, I just can't justify it when I let trees go that I'm going to then move money for NACTO. Although I will say that on a personal level, I do find it confounding that we would not carry on membership when that's the whole point of professional associations. If everyone just bails from them when the time gets up, well, then professional associations cease to function. And I think this is a rather poor cut myself. Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to respond to that if I could. So we have not removed all memberships. We have maintained our membership in the Canadian Association, Transportation Association of Canada. That is, we've kept that intact. We have dropped the US, we're recommending to drop the US version. The value judgment here, I think, is important. That cost of that membership is one seasonal employee. And that's the kind of value judgments we had to place on all of the decisions we made in terms of employment and service to citizens. So I'm just backing it up. I respect that people disagree with our decisions, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Russell, I believe, is next.
Thank you very much. I'm going to speak on NACTO for a second. One of the things that I am again looking at this through the lens of is health and safety first, food security next, and shelter third. And if NACTO will contribute to the health and safety, food security, and shelter of what we're doing, then that's great. There are some memberships that I see we would absolutely need. And I think Mr. Traves would be able to speak to any of the legal memberships that we would need. But as far as the rest of them, being suspended for a year, I'm not going to lose any sleep over. There was some other discussion on hazardous household waste. And so at this point, I would like to put a motion on the floor, I guess, to remove that from the list of items that we're considering to be removed. So therefore, we would maintain funding for household hazardous waste, specifically the Bayers Lake Depot, and making sure that that stays open. My estimate on that again is $360,000. I'm not sure how to construct the motion around that to remove that from this list, specifically especially where it's bundled into that $1.8 million number. But that is the intent of the motion.
Essentially, the process would be to move that to the parking lot as an adjustment to the main motion, which would be considered at the end with the other supplemental report that's coming back.
In that case, I would move to move household hazardous waste to the parking lot.
Second it. Second it.
Thank you, David. So once again, this is
just on that. Okay. So that you just to be so I'm clear, we have Councillor Mason's motion. We don't really have a parking lot at this point in time, do we, Mr. Traves?
Well, we're treating Councillor Mason's motion as the start of the parking lot, essentially. And if it may be that the other items, don't need to be addressed if council is satisfied with what Councillor Mason has proposed here when they see the final report. But if council's not persuaded and then needs to look at the specific items, then there'd be a list starting with this one.
So this is to be added to Councillor Mason's request for a supplemental staff report.
Effectively, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Russell, so you've moved that. It was seconded by Councillor Hensby. You wanted us to talk on it?
Yeah, just for a couple of minutes, please. This is effectively to make sure that we don't end up with a household hazardous waste ending up in the green bags or thrown into the woods, as we have seen recent cases here. And I'm sure elsewhere around the municipality, people are going to be continuing to do work at home, and asking them to hold on to their stuff through the summer, giving them zero options to get rid of it, I don't think is a wise move. This again gets back to the health and safety issue, and that's why I'm specifically looking at this. So I would appreciate support on this motion. Thank you.
Okay, is there discussion on the motion of Councillor Russell? On the no, that's a different one. So discussion on Councillor Russell's motion, or are we going to vote on the motion?
So Mike, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor.
So just clarification. So as we voted on Councillor Mason's item, has the introduction to the parking lot. So we're going to debate each item now and vote on each one?
Yeah, I think that's how we do it in budget usually, is that we look at each item and vote on whether it gets pursued to the or further to the parking lot, and then we vote on it again when it comes back, I assume. So, John, I think that's our practice.
That's correct, Mayor. And you recall council changed the rules to require recorded vote for all motions within budget committee. And so that builds the parking lot. And if council doesn't wish us to explore this item, then we don't.
Well,
recognizing Council Mason has already moved all grants and programs. So if it's already in there, arguably it doesn't need to be specified, subject to what I said before.
So anyway, I'll just say, that given these, current times and what we're trying to do, I'm not going to support the motion that's on the floor, because we're basically just asking people to wait until October 1st and maybe just hold on to their hazardous waste until then. So I think given the circumstances, to save that amount of money, I'm willing to do so.
Okay, anybody, Councillor Whitman on this?
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor Savage. So without seeing the motion in writing, it's tough, and there's lots of questions that are popping up from the earlier motion that we voted on already today. I'm wondering, what are the financial impacts of this decision?
Brad?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Again, it depends a little bit on how long your debate goes on, but based on Andrew's estimate of $60,000 a month, let's say the debate and the decisions are taken by the 1st of June and we turn this back on. This would be about 4 months at $60,000 a month, so we'll call it a $240,000 swing on the recommendations I've made today.
Thank you, and that's $240,000 in savings because of Councillor Russell's?
No.
No, no. That's the opposite. It's
Russell,
additional cost.
Thank you.
We've recommended that we reopen the depot in October. Councillor Russell is saying get it going, I believe, as soon as the debate decisions are final. So again, assuming a 1 June start date, we're probably looking at 4 months in the differential, 240,000 roughly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Zarowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Russell, for bringing this forward. I think the key in this is the naming of the waste. It is hazardous, and we don't want it going into the environment. Even a little bit going into the environment is problematic. It's toxic stuff, and we've set it aside because we're worried about its effects, not only storing it at home, but also there are those who will look to their own solutions, and I think Councillor Hensby's correct. We find a lot of stuff in the woods, and we're constantly cleaning up. This stuff disappears, goes into the watershed, goes into the food sources, goes into all sorts of places we don't want it. And I think it falls under the 3 categories that Councillor Russell has specified. It's an important thing. It is hazardous, and I think it's very important to keep out of the environment, so I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stretch.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Let's not forget where we are, folks. I just heard Brad say $250,000, and all people have to do is leave their batteries and paint cans in the garage for a couple of months. Not me. I'm against the motion. Thank you.
Can I get clarification on the one point? I believe the motion talks about closing the special household hazardous waste depot until October, but what about the mobile depots? We're not having them at all, like after October? Would there be any opportunity for mobile depots, or this being cut out totally? Because that's what I want, is after October 1, is we need to have some mobile depots strategically located, because not everyone's going to go to Bears Lake with their material.
Well,
if I may speak specifically on that, the motion that I was looking at was simply to reopen the Bears Lake facility from now through October, so that people would have at least some place to take their hazardous waste. It would not be to close anything else. It would simply be to reopen Bears Lake.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Can I get clarification on the mobile depots?
I'll come to you after.
Are they totally cut?
Well, just a sec now. That's a question. We'll come to you after Councillor Cleary and Councillor Adams. Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe Councillor Mason's motion was all programs and grants, and this would be included. However, this is one of those things where I think when we're building the parking lot, it's good for council to give direction on specific items that we want in or out to help staff guide them in bringing back some of those things. And this is one of those things where I'm actually okay with the household hazardous waste depot being closed for these number of months. I'm actually, it's funny, my lines from my respirator mask aren't there anymore. I was sanding my floor in my laundry room and mudroom, up until 10 minutes before our meeting started because our washing machine leaked and I had to rip up the floor, and now we're refinishing the wood that was underneath. I've got tons of paint. We're at home, so we're doing all kinds of projects, and we're just shoving things in the garage and in the closet until such time as things are open again. And I think most people would be more than happy just to hold, whether you're in an apartment or a house, just to hold on to a few extra batteries, a few extra CFLs, a few paint cans until things are up and running. Both for social distancing, but also for savings. I'm totally okay with the Household Hazardous Waste Depot in Bears Lake being closed until October. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I would like nothing more than to have this open. I've got 2 of those totes with paint cans and solvents, and I do have an old car batteries, all kinds of stuff, and I'm going to have more. But at $250,000, it's just a little too much. I'll wait. I'll just hang on. And just before I close off here, Councillor Zarowski, everything's very safe. Nothing is going to leak. I can assure you that I check it on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hensley.
Can I get clarification? The proposed cuts, is this the mobile depots for household special waste totally gone for all year long? Because normally they only held during the spring, summer, fall months. After October 1, we don't have them, or very rarely have them past October. So I'm asking if we're going to open up Bears Lake as a site, as a permanent site, we need to have at least 2 or 3 mobile depots, maybe on the peninsula, one at Micmac Wall, or one on the Eastern Shore or the Valley, because people aren't going to go all the way to Bears Lake. It's not worth the trip. They're going to throw it in the woods. So I need to know, are the mobile depots totally cut?
Brad or Andrew?
Mr. Mayor, our recommendation right now was, again, cut the mobile hazardous waste depots for the balance of this year only, and to suspend opening the main depot in Bears Lake until October. So as I understand Councillor Russell's motion, it deals with the main depot and opening it sooner. There's no direction yet on the table from council regarding the mobile depots.
Well, that's my issue. I think that if one opens after October 1, then we need to have the mobile depots open, or at least have availability of 1 or 2 in the metro areas that don't have the convenience to go into Bears Lake.
Okay, so Councillor Hensley.
That was my intention of seconding that motion, because that's my understanding. So if I need to clarify that, perhaps I have it put on the wish list or parking lot item that after October 1, we have some money available for mobile household special waste depots strategically located throughout the municipality.
So is that an amendment that Councillor Russell would have to indicate that that's a friendly amendment?
I'm comfortable with that amendment.
So the motion has been amended for the Bears Lake Depot plus the mobile depots, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I don't see any other speakers. Are we ready for the question?
Mike, Tim, can I speak just quickly?
Okay.
Won't be long. So just checking in with Brad. Brad, to keep the Center and Bears Road open, you're basically saying it's $60,000 a month. That's $2,000 a day. Can you help us understand that a little bit? I mean, the facility's there. I can understand it would have to be staffed versus not staffed. Well, what do we spend $60,000 a month on? Obviously, a facility still has to be heated. It still has to be lit. Still has to have utilities. It still has to be cleaned. Whatever. What's the difference is whether it's staffed or not, is it not?
Councillor, the costs are based on what has to be properly disposed of. Okay. That's the cost driver. Okay. It's not the facility itself. If you've had a chance to be there, it's not much of a facility. It has a very minimal staffing. The money is in properly disposing of the hazardous waste.
And we wouldn't be able just to store it for that time safely then, I guess. Would have to, it's moved out on a daily basis, or?
I don't know the exact details, but that level of aggregation of hazardous waste would not be acceptable.
Okay. All right. No, understood. Thank you.
Councillor Nichol on this?
Yes, because it seems to me this motion, even though it's amended, is an either or, like the savings was at Bayers Lake. And I share Councillor Hensby's concerns about the removal of all the, like come October 1st, you could have some household hazardous waste like locations, like you come to Coal Harbor Place or whatever. Those ones are, you know, there's a lot of uptake with it, but now, you know, I don't support the Bayers Lake being put back in, but if there's some chance that we could have these come October, have them, the mobile depots, I could support that. So I'm seeing, like, if I want one, I have to go with both.
The motion is now both, right?
Well, we can separate them.
I prefer to separate them then, if that's the case.
The motion is now both, but it would also be starting now. And you're talking about starting the mobile solid waste drop-offs later on.
And I appreciate you made the motion, but I'm trying to get clarification here, Councillor Russell. So I prefer to have them separated because I heard Councillor Hensby ask specifically to get clarification that if the mobile depots could still be held October 1st. And I'm not sure if that was responded to accurately.
Well, the motion was amended to include the mobile, correct?
Right.
That's what we're voting on. Right now, it's all one motion. I mean, John, we can always separate the motion, I suppose?
Correct. I would recommend that they be separated.
I'll request it since I moved it.
Thank you.
So Cheryl has put the motion on the chat. So the motion is that Halifax Regional Council maintain funding for household waste, specifically the Bayers Road Depot, in the amount of $360,000, and further that after October 1, mobile depots be held. So, okay, so we're going to vote on the question. So
well, that should be two motions, not one.
Yes.
Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't type fast enough. It's Councillor Austin. Just a question for Brad. Can we even open the depot in Bayers Lake right now? Like under the health directives?
I'm going to ask Andrew to chime in on that one, please.
Through the mayor to the councillor, it's a little bit of a judgment call with respect to the global stay-at-home orders. These events can be popular with respect to the number of cars that do show up, and the depot has been closed obviously for some time. I am aware that our service provider is ready and willing to go and has the appropriate PPE. So at the end of the day, I do think we could start up the program, but we just need to be mindful with respect to social distancing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, it says is this for this motion, Councillor Russell?
This is for this motion, yes.
Go ahead.
Mr. Anguish, you had mentioned that the bulk of the cost would be in disposing of the materials once they arrived at the depot. And so what I'm wondering is this, by having this in the budget as it is it simply deferring the cost until the depot is open again? If, for example, $40,000 is to accommodate the eventual disposal, people are going to still be disposing of that same material. So would we have a huge cost after it's open eventually?
Potentially, yes.
So this motion is simply re-adding in the operational cost of the depot, not the disposal cost once the material gets to the depot.
as Andrew had stated earlier, he was trying to give you, again, this whole system is based on the amount of waste, not a per month rent, not right? It's the waste is the cost driver. So yes, to your question, is there some pent up demand out there and there's some costs waiting to come? Yes. As we said earlier, one of our primary reasons for keeping the depot shut at this time was for the reasons Andrew stated. To avoid significant gatherings, we can have quite a lineup for these depots, and to avoid the additional handling. So it's hard for us to crystal ball exactly how much is going to come in and when. So that's why we've given you the very high level rough cost on a per month basis. Not probably the best way to lay it out for you, but we're trying to give you estimates here.
No, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the clarity. So to look at this motion a little bit differently, what it is, again, is the operational costs of running the depot. The costs to dispose of the materials that would already be there are either going to happen now or later on. The trade-off for the operational costs is people are going to be storing the hazardous materials at home, the batteries and paint cans or whatever, or they won't store them at home. They'll put them out in their green bags, or they'll dispose of them in some other manner that is not safe for the environment. And so I'm simply looking for support to this so that we are able to dispose of the household hazardous waste properly. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so let's go to the question. We're going to first of all vote on the Bayers Road Depot. So Councillor Russell is asking that we keep the Bayers Road Depot and reverse the cut that was suggested. Correct, Cheryl? That's what we're doing?
Correct.
Okay.
Minor correction, it's Bears Lake.
Right. Okay, so whenever we're ready, Cheryl.
Commence voting. Councillor Stretch.
Against the motion.
Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten. Councillor Nickel.
This is on the first part of the amendment?
This is part one.
Nay, no.
Councillor Austin.
Against.
Councillor Mancini.
I think he's gone. He's doing COVID work.
Councillor Mason.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Clary.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Against.
Councillor Adams.
Against.
Councillor Surowski.
I am for the motion.
Councillor Whitman.
No.
Councillor Blackburn.
Sadly voting no for the motion.
Councillor Russell.
For the motion.
Councillor Oudit.
No.
Mayor Savage.
No. So the motion is defeated. It was.
Yes. It was 4.
12.
No.
12
4.
against.
13. 11. 4-11. There were
Okay.
2 people not present.
Motion is defeated. So we're going to go to the second part of that motion, which is mobile depots be held in locations throughout the municipality after October 1st. Right, Councillor Hensby?
Correct.
Okay, let's do the vote on
Cost to
that.
that again? What's the cost to that again? I'm sorry.
Do we know what the cost on that is?
We would need some guidance as to how many mobiles you want to do.
4.
4. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to take his best crystal ball guess at what that's going to cost us.
I'm going to say 90,000. For 4 events, 2 large events, 2 more remote events, let's call them. It's about 90,000.
Okay. Cheryl?
Thank you.
Councillor Stretch?
Muted,
Against the
Cheryl.
motion.
Councillor Hensby?
Affirmative.
Councillor Karsten? Councillor Nichol?
Yes.
Councillor Austin?
Against.
Councillor Mancini? Councillor Mason?
Against.
Councillor Smith?
Against.
Councillor Cleary?
No.
Councillor Walker?
Against?
Councillor Adams?
For.
Councillor Sarowski?
I am for.
Councillor Whitman?
I'm going to abstain because I don't have enough information.
Abstentions are allowed.
I'm sorry, Councillor, you can't abstain.
An abstention is counted as a vote in the
No.
negative.
Okay, abstention it is.
Deputy Mayor Blackburn?
Sadly voting no on the motion.
Councillor Russell?
For the motion?
Councillor Outhit?
Yes.
And Mayor Savage?
No.
So that's 5 in favor, 10 against.
So the motion is defeated by a vote of 10 to 5. So we're back on the main motion. And I have Councillor Walker and Outhit, but if I've missed anybody, just send a note. It's getting awful hard in this chat line to keep track. So Councillor Walker.
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess from the deliberations we've had from the solicitor, I guess I have to put on the floor, just to put it back in the parking lot doesn't mean that it will be supported in the end or not, but at least we'll know whether that's under Councillor Mason's motion or not. And that's for the senior snow removal. So I'd like to put that in the parking lot.
Second, Councillor Cleary.
Seconded by Councillor Cleary. Okay. Is there discussion on that, or do we just go to the vote? You asking for the whole amount, Russell?
For the whole amount, yes, for the seniors snow removal.
How much is that, six? How much is that?
Wasn't it 600,000?
I'll second that.
Correct.
600,000, Brad?
Correct. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I have a,
At least it'll be in the parking lot and we can look at it and see where we go from there, but it's a service that is needed by many. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Cleary for a question for Mr. English.
Go ahead.
Brad, you had mentioned that the YMCA had canceled the program, and you had said that you could stand it up again. Would that be the municipality doing it, or would that be another partner like the Y doing it?
Thanks for the question. I apologize if I said they canceled. They did not cancel. Their just contract expired. Okay, and basically, well, the contract expired. It's as simple as that. We were in negotiations and continue to be talking to the YMCA about this. And I see, yeah, nope, that's good. I was just checking to see if I had any new information. So yes, we have time to recover this, but we need direction fairly rapidly because obviously we have need time to stand up the program.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify that point, may I, in regards to the Y, so they have not expressed an interest of not continuing the service?
They did. That was their position probably back at the time I was presenting to council. They since reached out to us and we've looked at, we're talking to them again. Obviously, we would have to negotiate new terms, but they certainly seem genuinely interested in offering the program again. They've been a good partner of ours and we saw no reason why we wouldn't go down that avenue again if the program stays in play.
Thank you.
Brad, just a question. I know we increased this recently, the last year's budget or something. How much did we actually spend on it last year?
I'd have to get you the specific numbers. It was close to the full amount. We had 694 applicants served by the program. So I'd have to get back to you on the exact full amount, but we're basically getting to that full spend because, as you know, we ramped on extra dollars.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious on that exact point. Is 600,000, is there risk here where this is getting retendered and the cost for this one, I think every year have been more than we've anticipated, that it won't be enough to carry on this program?
Basically the way this program, it's applicant based. And so the numbers have been up and down over the years. And so staff has always been responding. So we topped it up to $600,000 as directed by council. Basically the way this works, you're right, the prices could go up and therefore the money go less distance. But what that does is that just means that we go so far as the money goes and then we wait list seniors. Our past practice is then to, once we see that starting to occur, we double back to council and seek additional financial authority. So it's not a go or no go for the program as much as it is how many people get served by the program.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. So I support this to an extent. I would rather see us either look at this as half, so 300,000 or even a quarter, and use it for more like an emergency basis. So if there's a senior who has signed up and there's an emergency, they need to get out the house or something along those senses, I think I would support that. But putting the full 600,000 amount in, considering the discussions that we're having, I would definitely see that as a concern. I'd rather put a little bit more money into the hand crews for our staff for able to do bus stops. And I know a significant amount of my district, small areas, had a lot of the hand folks or the hand crews doing the work. So I'd rather see us put some of the money in those places rather than just putting it on the seniors program. So I don't know if I will support it at 600, but if we were to look at maybe cutting it in half or even a quarter and use it for emergency, I would more support the motion. And if Councillor Russell is Walker is interested in doing that, then sure. But if not, I'll be voting against it.
Councillor Stretch.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've always supported this program, and I understand the genesis of why it's here. But I'm just not so sure that I can support this at this particular time. I kind of agree with or somebody speaking there. I kind of agree with Councillor Smith here in this case. And you know what really bothers me? We've got hundreds of thousands of people right now, young, able-bodied people sitting at home, getting a check from the government. Maybe we should make a prerequisite that they do a little community service and help some of these older folks, or some relatives can step up. I'm just going to have great difficulty supporting this as it relates to the amount of money we're talking, considering exactly where we are. Thank you.
Councillor, there's probably a lot of young people right now that would volunteer to shovel snow. Councillor Stretch, maybe not so much in Christmas time. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you. So just to be clear, if this goes in the parking lot, it's just going to come back as a line item, or is there going to be added information with regards to the contract, or to Councillor Smith's point, wiggling with the actual amount from being lower than 600,000? And then if we just put it on the list, I think we need to get more information as to what that could look like if we approve it at that time. But we will be approving it when it comes back, just like we will with Councillor Mason's motion as well.
Correct.
Correct? Okay.
Yep.
So there will be more information coming from Brad?
Well, we can ask Brad. I mean, it's pretty clear, I think, how much it is and the fact that it's subscribed. Brad,
I was referring to the contract and things like that. There seems to be a lot of variables.
Well, it's a great question, Councillor. So I would be concerned about going to the table and negotiating on something that we don't have direction to do. So that's a bit unfair to those in the process. So not so much staff will do what you ask us to do, but to ask the YMCA to come to the table and then negotiate in good faith and then not go there, I think we should. My recommendation is we need to set a direction to staff and then we'll go out and execute on that direction.
Okay. I guess I'll speak on this just for a second. I'm going to support this motion, but I don't support 600,000. I'm very much aligned with where Councillor Smith was and perhaps some other councillors, that I will not be voting for 600,000 unless we get a windfall from between now and the time that we have to approve the budget. But I do think having that service to seniors who really need help and people with disabilities, to me, that's it's a service, but I don't think I would support 600,000. But I will vote for this motion on the assumption that when it comes back, we will then debate it to see where it goes. That's my view. Councillor Cleary?
To Mr. Anguish's point and a couple of comments raised by yourself and Councillor Smith and Stretch, would it be fair at this point then, if Brad's going to go away and start talking to the Y and negotiate something, if we actually vote on the amount that we would all entertain, like whether it's 2, 3, 4, rather than say 6 and then come back and we vote no and reduce it? Or maybe I can ask Mr. Anguish, is there a range? Because I know in the last 3 or 4 years it's been increased. I remember when I joined council it was 200,000, and then we increased it to 4, and then last year we increased it to 6. So does it, I guess, in the negotiation with YMCA, does it matter if it's 6 and then it goes down to 4, or I guess do they need extra staff depending on the size of the program? You know, if they've got 600 seniors signed up or 400 seniors signed up, does that mean they need more people to actually run the program?
Yeah, hopefully I'm unmuted. Yes, size matters, I think, in this case, but it'd be order of magnitude. I mean, if it's half the size or the full size, I think it would be the kind of order of magnitude. And yes, that would make a difference to them because they need to know just how much to invest. At some level, it's not worth doing it, and then at another level, it requires additional resources. In terms of your observations of the budgets over the years, the budgets have fluctuated, but I would say the final amounts have not. In many cases, I recall coming to council and getting additional funds. So where we've landed each year has been kind of similar. It's just where we started in a budget amount. So, but you're right, it has grown over the years. But I just want to drive home the point. I mean, what staff would recommend is we get firm direction from council that we are doing the program. It would be somewhat disingenuous to go out and negotiate with a not-for-profit partner, put them through it if we're really not sure if we're going through with the program. So, and I know that's a tough ask at this time, but that's the way it should be done.
So, Brad, if council decided to do half, you could work with that, though?
We'll certainly take that to the table and engage their interest, and if not them, we'd obviously, if that's the will of council, we'd look to see, as Councillor Hansby mentioned, to see if there's other partners that might be interested in doing the program, and then obviously we'd have to entertain ourselves trying to figure out how we would provide value to this program as well. It's not our main line work, but at the end of the day, we're always an option as well.
Thank you. Councillor Stretch.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're pulling at my heartstrings now, and I maybe came off a little harsh earlier. That's just my mood this afternoon. It's getting late. But you and Councillor Cleary make a good point. Maybe there is a happy medium. I don't want to see the service discontinued. At the same time, 600 grand's a lot of money. So if you're looking for something to come forward that is half that amount, I could likely vote for that. But if we're cutting everywhere else, I think it would be unreasonable not to at least take some cuts in this direction. Thank you.
I think you're muted, Mr. Mayor.
I thought I was going to go a whole day without muting myself. At this point in time, the motion is for 600,000. Somebody would have to amend it, or else it will go to the parking lot at 600,000. And then, of course, it comes back for discussion. Councillor Zarowski.
Oh, there we go. Microphones. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm confused. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's the second contiguous day in budget talks that's causing this, but I don't know what I'm voting for here. If I'm parsing, and let me try to provide some clarification on my confusion. Part of it is I'm looking at a shortfall in money, and we're trying to filter this thing through various programs, and we don't fund hazardous waste, which I think is an important thing, and yet snow removal isn't under the same sort of category, and we're talking about funding it, using funds for that. And there are alternatives. So is this money coming out of our pot? Is it coming from someone else's pot? We're helping them along, and we may or may not give them some money to help with that. Could I get like really clear direction on this? Because my feeling is that it doesn't meet what I think we need, our priorities, which is food security, social security, the things that are really important to the well-being of our society as a whole, because our budget has changed. So I saw Brad popped up there for a second, and he wants to clarify this. So Brad, if you could help me out here, I'd appreciate it.
Well, I can certainly try, Councillor. Essentially, this program is managed by the YMCA. The service is delivered to households. Last year, 694 households got this service, and is delivered through contractors. Okay, so the YMCA sets it all up, and it's set up through contractors, and the service is delivered to seniors in households. Basically, they go till the money's exhausted, and we haven't really ever hit that. We've come close, to the best of my knowledge, and essentially, if we do get top out on that program, then we waitlist those seniors to see if there's more money that could be made available for the program. But essentially, that's how it is. Seniors enroll on a first-come, first-served basis, and delivered through contract as it's delivered to a private property.
Who pays for it?
It's paid by us.
It is paid by us.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's the bottom line for me. Okay, I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
You skipped me again.
Sorry?
I thought I was on the speaker's chat list before Sam, sorry.
No, yeah, you are. I thought you were just asking a question. Was the previous amount 400?
That is, and I also want to make the comment, if you want to talk about social isolation, you'll be freezing the seniors in their homes. Just wondering if you don't get the snow removal done for them.
Was the previous amount, it was 400,000 last year, wasn't it, Brad?
No.
2 years ago.
2 years ago?
We added 200,000 to it last year to make it 600,000.
Correct. Right, Brad? Just get Brad to confirm that?
Yeah. I'd have to check the records to be absolutely certain. It's been up and it's been down. It's been 500 and we've added 100. It's been 400 and we've added 200. I'd have to double check my years to be laser accurate.
Okay. David, anything else?
That's it. I can tell you it was 4 plus 2 for the last couple of years.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick question for Brad based on a previous answer. If we end up with no provider like the Y or someone else to do this, and you reference, potentially we're doing it. I mean, if memory serves in terms of the numbers of this program, they're very heavily on the Eastern Shore in rural HRM, where we don't provide the snow clearing on the streets. There's no sidewalks. How feasible would that be where we don't have boots on the ground out there?
Sorry, and I misled you when I said we. It would be possibly HRM doing the administration as the Y does now. We would still have to contract the service. I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cleary on this again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just so for Councillor Zarowski and some others who may not be as familiar with the program. So essentially what it does is it shovels the walkway, the porch, and the path to the oil tank, depending on what the resident has. So if you apply a social lens to this, and Councillor Zarowski mentioned yesterday, that he wished we had that policy in place because we needed it for this budget. Well, I'm going to do that for him right now. So if we apply a social lens to this decision of whether we put some money in or take some money out, essentially what you're doing is you're keeping some of these seniors who have mobility issues from getting mail, getting their oil tank filled, and being able to get in and out of their property safely. And so, it is an important program, and I hope we vote for it. Now, putting it in the parking lot at 6, if people can vote for that, because we're just putting the parking lot for now and it ends up being 4, if Mr. Anguish is negotiating with the Y kind of in that range of 3, 4, 6, given where we might be in a few days as we discuss this further, that's fine. So I hope we can put this in notionally knowing that it's going to be a some amount, if not the full amount. So it is an important program and I hope people support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stretch. Or are you just making a comment?
I'm just making a comment. I already spoke twice. I'm all right.
Yeah, well, we're in committee of the whole. You can speak as often as you want. Councillor Nicol, is that a?
Well, I will then.
Oh, my.
Well, we're in committee of the whole. Is that not right?
No, it is correct. I just thought that when people have a question, not.
I'll yield to Russell. Go.
No, Russell wants to close, he said. Councillor Nicol, are you making a comment or are you making a?
I just did the calculation of 600,000 to divide by 694 households. That's what it comes out to.
$864. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, Councillor Zarowski, if you want to speak again or if.
Yeah, I would like to talk, and I really don't appreciate the patronizing from Councillor Cleary. I'll just pass that on. I understand the social aspects of it. I understand that there are difficulties here, but we're talking about something which is way down the road, first of all. It's not in the summer, it's not in the fall, and probably won't be implemented for another 8 or 9 months. We've got a lot to go through before then. And as I parse things, as I take a look at, the extreme social aspects of policing and fire, which are critical to the functioning of our municipality, I understand that it may be inconvenient and in some cases a little more than inconvenient for certain seniors. However, we have a lot of work to do, and I appreciate robust discussion as much as the next person does, but I don't like being patronized. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I didn't think it was in the budget under Councillor Mason's thing. Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. I look at this as a specialized program, and in the end, when it's in the parking lot, and when it comes back, I may not be able to support it. But at the same time, there's an income level on this. It's not for your rich people, it's for your low-income seniors who are trying to stay in their house. And as I've been listening to the debate, half the amount, well, what's an emergency and what's not an emergency? And I'm quite sure if you're 85 years old trying to stay in your house, everything's an emergency. So to me, it can be put in the parking lot at 600,000. And when it comes back, we can make a decision. But when I look at most of my seniors in my district, and we're not paying little taxes, who are paying big taxes, landlocked into their house, what do they get? And those that don't make the program, I usually have to make arrangements with somebody to make a pathway to their oil tank so they can get oil, because if oil companies are not going to deliver it without a pathway shoveled. So I'll leave it to that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. I think we're ready to vote on this. We'll just pause 1 sec, make sure I haven't missed anybody on the list. Okay, let's do the vote.
Councillor Stretch.
For the motion.
Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
Councillor Carson. Councillor Nickel.
For, yes.
Councillor Austin.
In favor.
Councillor Manzini. Councillor Mason.
For the motion.
Councillor Smith.
For the motion.
Councillor Cleary.
Yes.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Adams.
For.
Councillor Sareski.
Against, regrettably.
Councillor Whitman.
I'm a yes.
Deputy Mayor Blackburn.
Voting yes on the motion.
Councillor Russell.
For the motion.
Councillor Outhit.
Yes.
And Mayor Savage.
What was the question? Yes, I'm in favor of the motion as it is for now. So that passes.
Yes.
Sure. Okay, that passes. Now I just want to see a check of where we are. We're pretty close to 5 o'clock. The only person I had to speak generally to Brad was Councillor Outhit. So maybe.
Well, that's very important.
Pardon me?
There's nothing more important than that. Good heavens.
No, I'm not diminishing the importance of the personality, just that I think we are getting near the end of a day that people have other things to get to as well. So, Councillor,
I'm looking to put a couple of things in the parking lot, Mike, so maybe we should quit while we're still in one piece. I don't know.
That would be my sense. I don't know how contentious. Maybe we could, Jacques and John, maybe we can come back on Friday here.
Yes, for sure. I take it there are further questions for Brad?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll, as long as Brad is available, I know that he had a prior engagement on Friday. I'm not sure whether he can make it or not. If not, we could have somebody else come in and have Brad come in next week to finish up.
Brad, what is your?
I know you had a prior commitment, Brad.
I will thank you, Jacques, for that consideration. I will enter in negotiations with my family tonight and make it happen. We'll be here Friday.
All right, but listen, I don't want this to be the cause of any sort of domestic tension, Brad, so just let us know. But as it is right now, we'll begin at 1 o'clock on Friday. I have Tim and I have Paul on the list. And then after that, Jacques, we would go to, was it Parks and Rec or Transit?
Parks and Rec and Transit, right.
Parks and Rec and Transit.
Bring Denise in. I think what we'll do probably is bring Transit in next and then Denise after that.
Okay. So folks, just so we're all clear, we're going to meet Friday at 1 o'clock. We're going to go till 4. It's a long weekend. And then we're not going to meet again until 6 o'clock Saturday morning. We'll have our next meeting at 6 o'clock on Saturday morning, and then 6 o'clock on Sunday morning. Cheryl, it doesn't work?
Sounds
1
good.
o'clock on Friday, 1 to 4. What meetings do we have next week? One at Tuesday? Anyway, we'll have a look at what else we need to add to the budget to make sure that we get through this. I want to thank you all. Brad, thank you to you and your team, to Andrew, Victoria, everybody. Thank you, councilors, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Happy birthday again.
Indeed. Thank you. All right, folks.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy
That's just the
birthday, dear Mayor. Happy birthday.